Chapter 4393. Seeing this, Xiaohua no longer had any doubts. He bowed and said, "Junior has seen it." "Thank you, Senior." Once the image of the sea god appeared, Bei Xian didn't dare to stand in the air. She lowered her head slightly and landed below the image of the sea god. Hearing Xiaohua's words, she respectfully raised her hand. The image of the sea god turned into a sky full of fireflies and slowly disappeared. "Do you believe me now?" Bei Xian asked faintly. "Yes." Xiaohua nodded. Junior has no more objections. Although Junior doesn't know if Senior and Senior Bei Ming are really lovers, but there is some relationship after all. Junior has decided to take a gamble. You don't believe this?" Bei Xian was really speechless. "You are too careful. It's just a trace of Bei Ming. Why do you have to be so careful?" According to Xiaohua's previous thoughts, no matter what the rainbow conch was, as long as he reached the 10,000 demon realm, he would immediately throw it to a place and ignore it. As for the life and death of the rainbow conch, it was not something he was willing to care about. Since he met Bei Xian today, this Bei Xian was obviously related to the rainbow conch. And if there was no accident, her words should be true. After all, this was the 1,000 demons sacred realm, not the Dawn Rain continent. Bei Xian couldn't know about the corner of the Dawn Rain continent's yellow flower ridge, let alone the god's statue hidden in his space. Of course, it couldn't be ruled out that Bei Xian and the rainbow conch were enemies. After she obtained the rainbow conch, she immediately killed it. This was also the reason why Xiaohua wanted to take a gamble. This junior met Senior Bei Ming in an extremely secretive place. Xiaohua thought for a moment and explained, "And Junior only knows that this place is in the West Sea. As for where it is, Junior can't find it." "No matter." Bei Xian smiled. "You just need to tell me the approximate location of the West Sea and I can find it." "Actually," Xiaohua hesitated and said, "after Junior left, Senior Bei Ming was no longer there. There is no meaning in Senior going there." "What do you mean by that?" Bei Xian was stunned for a moment. However, after a few breaths, she suddenly froze. The entire space was dead silent. There was not a trace of sound. Then the entire space shook violently. Countless seven-colored flowers bloomed uncontrollably. Bei Xian's stuttering voice resounded throughout the entire space. "You mean your body?" Happiness had come too suddenly. Even Bei Xian, a true supreme expert of the 1,000 demons sacred realm, could not help but lose her composure. Xiaohua took a small detour. This was the effect he wanted. Looking at Bei Xian's ecstasy, his previous doubts had completely disappeared. Xiaohua smiled and said, "I'll let Senior know." What Senior wants, the rainbow conch, is actually on Junior. Junior can give it to Senior at any time. Woo! The rain of light fell like tears, wetting the space, wetting Xiaohua's domain, and also wetting Bei Xian's heart. The entire world trembled in this rain of light, just like Bei Xian's choked heart. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Bei Xian stopped trembling. She said softly, Where is he?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Senior, Junior has placed the rainbow conch in the Kunlun immortal realm. The Kunlun mirror cannot be opened in Senior's domain. Give me the Kunlun mirror. I have a way." Bei Xian said without hesitation. Xiaohua was even more embarrassed. He smiled and said, "This Kunlun mirror is Junior's natal magic treasure. I'm afraid it's not easy to give it to Senior." Bei Xian's expression changed slightly when she heard this. "Senior, don't misunderstand." Xiaohua hurriedly explained, "Senior only needs to open this domain, and Junior can take out the rainbow conch." "You can't give me the Kunlun mirror?" Bei Xian asked again. Xiaohua frowned slightly. After a moment, he smiled and said, "Senior, please rest assured. Junior is a man of his words. Once I promise, I will definitely do it. Moreover, with Senior's ability, how can Junior escape? Besides, Junior can find such a powerful backer like Senior. Junior won't find trouble for himself for no reason." Bei Xian nodded and said proudly, "You don't dare. Not to mention the 1,000 demons sacred realm, Even if it's the hidden immortal continent or the pure land world, as long as I want, I can kill you no matter where you hide. Xiaohua said with a smile. Junior won't be so ungrateful and overestimate himself. While speaking, Bei Xian'er's figure flashed and turned into thousands of seven-colored halos. Then, the seven-colored world in front of Xiaohua suddenly opened. Amidst the soaring brilliance, the dazzling starry sky appeared above his head again. As soon as Xiaohua's aura appeared, Wen Chu and the others immediately sensed the location of the space. The tension immediately disappeared without a trace. Wen Chu said happily, "Fellow immortal Xiao?" The rainbow sea god Shell and the other two great sages also said happily, "Ancestor." Unfortunately, before they finished speaking, Xiaohua's voice transmitted to Wen Chu, the celestial being, Daoist sorcerer, and Feng Wu. The four of them couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Wen Chu, Daoist sorcerer, and Feng Wu didn't move. The celestial being took advantage of the three great sages looking at the soaring seven-colored halos to enter the space with the 36 scattered nascent souls. "You don't have to come over. Xiaohua and I have something important to do." Bei Xian'er's voice sounded very majestic in the distance. At the same time, a seven-colored halo rose in front of the great sages. Not only did it block the three great sages, but it also separated Wen Chu, Feng Wu, Daoist sorcerer from Xiaohua. Yes, the three great sages of the demon clan didn't dare to disobey the order. They responded in a low voice and still stood in midair. Wen Chu and the other two also stood in midair and didn't seem to be on guard. "Senior, please wait a moment." Xiaohua smiled and put his hand into his pocket. But at this moment, Xiaohua stopped again and said with a smile, "By the way, Senior, can you let Junior's brother out first? Junior is really worried about his injury." Bei Xian'er seemed a little unhappy, but she didn't say anything. In the light and shadow, the figures of Little White Dragon and Jade Wave appeared. What's going on?" The five-colored sea god Shell was stunned all of a sudden. He looked at Jade Wave in disbelief. He could understand why Bei Xian'er took Little White Dragon away, but he didn't know why Bei Xian'er also took Jade Wave away. However, before he could say more, Xiaohua had already taken out the space from his pocket. Looking at the Kunlun mirror, Bei Xian'er's eyes suddenly became fiery. She stared at the Kunlun mirror. Xiaohua didn't panic. First, he urged his spiritual power. The mirror flashed with brilliance, and Little White Dragon and Jade Wave were taken in. Seeing Xiaohua shamelessly take Jade Wave away, the five-colored sea god Shell wanted to say something again. But at this moment, a brilliance rushed out of the space, and a seven-colored conch immediately appeared from the brilliance. Whoosh! As soon as the seven-colored conch appeared, without waiting for Xiaohua to raise his hand to take it, a seven-colored tentacle appeared out of thin air and immediately imprisoned the area within 100 miles. After a gust of wind swept past, the seven-colored conch disappeared without a trace. "Ha!" Xiaohua said with a smile. "Senior is really a little impatient, ouch." Before Xiaohua could finish his words, the voice stopped abruptly. But just like before, under the torn earth, another seven-colored light and shadow suddenly appeared. Bei Xian'er's huge seven-colored shell appeared in the light and shadow like the sky. Beyond the expectations of the three great saints of the demon clan, it covered Xiaohua again. At this moment, Xiaohua didn't use his spiritual power to teleport at all. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, and the corner of his mouth carried a trace of a smile, as if everything was within his calculations. Just as the seven-colored shell covered Xiaohua in a flash, Xiaohua's mind rolled, and he pulled Celestial, Shi, and Hui out of the space. As the seven-colored space descended, it enveloped all of them. In the blink of an eye, it mysteriously disappeared in front of the 6th 9th grade elemental energy experts. The golden-winged Great Peng's brain wasn't enough. He looked at the night sky, then at the five-colored sea god Shell, and asked curiously, "Shell Saint, what is the ancestor doing?" The five-colored sea god Shell was also puzzled. He hesitated for a moment, then replied, "It seems that the ancestor and Daoist Xiao still have some things to discuss." As the five-colored sea god Shell spoke, It looked at Wen Chu and Feng Wu. What about those 9th grade essence energy spirit bodies? Where is that 3-headed, 6-armed celestial? At this moment, the golden-winged Great Pring suddenly realized that the 36th tribulation scattered nascent souls had disappeared, and the celestial skeleton had also disappeared. Feng Wu indifferently replied, Peng Saint, Bei Saint, Nai Saint, although this is the first time we've met, this saint also belongs to the Great Sage Hall, so this saint wants to hear more about the Great Sage Hall. I wonder if the 3 of you can enlighten me? Oh. The flying feather void beast immediately understood Feng Wu's meaning. He originally wanted to say something, but when he saw Feng Wu's confident appearance and thought of Feng Wu's previous threat, he rolled his eyes and said with a smile, Of course. However, before this saint talks about the Great Sage Hall, I wonder where in the 1,000 Demons sacred realm does Phoenix Saint think the Great Sage Hall is located? Feng Wu asked with interest. Hearing Ni Saint's words, it seems that the Great Sage Hall isn't in the 1,000 Demons sacred realm? How does Phoenix Saint know? The golden-winged Great Pring tactfully joined in the discussion about the Great Sage Hall, although the 5-colored sea god Seashell was a little concerned and had no intention of participating in the so-called discussion. He also knew in his heart that not only was Feng Wu a 7-star great saint, whose future potential far exceeded that of a great saint like himself, but even Wen Chu and Daoist, which weren't people that he could kill today. However, if he missed today, his star-concealing lake, Pring Saint's blue moon sky, and Ni Saint's flux forest would all be in the open, while Wen Chu and the other 2 would be in the dark. If they wanted to go against him, the 1,000 Demons sacred realm would probably never have a day of peace. The saying that there would not be a great sage in the 1,000 Demons sacred realm for the next 100,000 years was definitely not a lie. Therefore, the 5-colored sea god Shell only listened from the side and did not leave easily. Chapter 4394. Of course, whether it was the 5-colored sea god Shell, the flying feather void beast, the golden-winged Great Pang, or Feng Wu, Wen Chu, and Daoist sorcerer, they all paid attention to their surroundings, waiting for the 7-colored light to appear again. However, as they waited, the east was already daybreak. When Xiao Hua saw the 7-colored light appear again, he didn't panic at all. He pulled Tian Ren Hui and Shur out of the space and stood in midair, coldly looking ahead. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't teleport and instead sent the 3 9th level essence power cultivators into his space, Bei Xian couldn't help but be shocked. She asked curiously, Why didn't you escape? Could it be you already knew that I wouldn't let you go? Xiao Hua, Tian Ren, Hui, and Shur released their domains to protect themselves. On Tian Ren's shoulder, the dream mirage butterfly lay there obediently. Xiao Hua said coldly again, You think too highly of yourself. You're just a foreign race from the Red Ocean domain that wandered to our 3 continents. Do you really think you're an ancestor? How could a foreign race know the power of our human race? The human race is just one of the 10,000 spirits. It's not even comparable to the monster race. How dare you compare to my shell race? When Bei Xian saw that Xiao Hua was trapped in her space again and that the 7-colored conch was already in her hands, she simply withdrew her previous attitude and laughed proudly. However, your human race's self-righteousness is really too powerful. It can be said to be the #1 divine ability in the 3 continents. When I was in the Red Ocean domain, I never thought that in this world, there would be such a weak spirit seed that actually calls itself the leader of 10,000 spirits. It's really the biggest joke in the world. It's really unimaginably thick skin. Oh, I remember that the human race has a saying called, deceiving one's ears and stealing a bell. Is that what it means? Hearing Bei Xian's carefree mockery, Xiao Hua only rubbed his nose, the corner of his mouth also revealing a mocking smile. There was no other reason. The vastness of this world had long surpassed Xiao Hua and Bei Xian's knowledge. Although Bei Xian's cultivation was far superior to Xiao Hua's, she didn't have Xiao Hua's good fortune. How could she know about the ruins and the primitive continent? Therefore, although her words were somewhat reasonable, they were not completely correct. Xiao Hua also disdained to argue with her. Moreover, Xiao Hua also understood that after Bei Xian obtained the rainbow-colored conch, the greatest burden in her heart had been removed. It was inevitable that she would vent some of her emotions. Perhaps this mockery was her way of venting all the sufferings she encountered in the 3 continents. Deceiving myself? Xiaohua indifferently replied, "Our human race's classical stories are as numerous as the hairs on an ox. Presumably, how could a brainless shellfish like you understand them? Don't think that just because you can take human form, you can compare with us humans. Of course, if your excellency wishes to improve and draw closer to the human race, this Xiao does not mind gifting you a book. First, you will understand what it means to deceive one's ears while stealing a bell. Then, you will understand what it means to have a sense of propriety, justice, integrity, and shame. Finally, you will understand what it means to repay kindness with enmity." Ha! Bei Xian'er's flirtatious body swayed unlimitedly. In an instant, countless illusions of copulation appeared in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Her voice, which was like lust, resounded throughout the entire 7-colored space. "Little doll, you are really eloquent. However, you are still too young. Do you know what I have seen the most in the vicissitudes of this world? It is nothing more than selfish desires, possession, war, mutual deception." Xiaohua's tone was still indifferent. "Oh." Bei Xian'er stared blankly for a moment before asking curiously, How did you know?" "There is a saying in Buddhism, if there is Buddha in the heart, all things are Buddha. If there is devil in the heart, all things are devil." Xiaohua coldly replied, "You are the descendant of the Shell race's royal family. You were chased by the Sea race and escaped from the Red Sea domain. All you want is revenge, and your memories are filled with bone-deep hatred. What else can you see? You don't need to say anything, this Xiao knows." "You?" Bei Xian'er was shocked. She said in shock, How do you know so much? Did he tell you?" As she spoke, the space within 10,000 li around Xiaohua rippled with blue waves that soared into the sky, just like the shock and vigilance in Bei Xian'er's heart. Xiaohua didn't pay attention to Bei Xian'er's question. Instead, his eyes flashed with benevolence as he said, "The matters of this world are always impermanent, and they will never change because of your preferences. Whether you like the matters of this world or not, they happen every day. Whether it is love, hatred, affection, or enmity, there are many of them. This Xiao doesn't know what your Shell race thinks, but our human race has always placed love as the #1 priority. This world cannot be without love, nor can it be without warmth. If you place love in your heart and use your eyes to see love, everything in the world will change." "No need to say any more." Bei Xian'er interrupted Xiaohua. "What you said is very good. You have Buddha in your heart, and all things are Buddha. Unfortunately, I have devil in my heart, and all things are devil. Even if you practice the flowery words of a Confucian cultivator to the extreme, you can't change me. I only want to know, how did you know that I am the descendant of a royal family?" "I guessed." Xiaohua saw that his persuasion was unsuccessful, and he sighed in his heart as he replied. Bei Xian'er frowned and shook her head slightly. "How can I believe that? Could it be that you were sent by the hibernating Sea King? Don't make blind guesses." Xiaohua waved his hand. "This Xiao has nothing to do with the Sea King. This Xiao only guessed from your previous words. Say it." Bei Xian'er looked at Xiaohua with interest and said with a smile, "The brains of your human race are really powerful. If what you said is reasonable, I can consider erasing your memories and let you go." "Don't lie to this Xiao." Xiaohua snorted coldly. 200 years ago, you already had the idea of killing me to silence me. How can you change your mind now?" A strange light appeared in Bei Xian'er's eyes, but she didn't say anything else. "When my human race lies, we always pay attention to 9 sentences of truth and 1 sentence of lie. Your Excellency has been in my 3 continents for so long, you must have learned a lot from my human race. At least this kind of lying has already reached the essence of the human race." Even now, Xiaohua still didn't forget to dig at Bei Xian'er, trying to anger her. "This Xiao believes that most of what you said earlier is true. After all, you don't have to hide it. However, you lied about your background, But this Xiao was able to tell this lie because this Xiao was born in Shanghua Ming. Actually, it's very simple. How can a spatial passage be easy to find? During a great battle, it's possible to bump into a temporary spatial passage, but that's not even a 90% chance of survival. If there were more than one shell race that escaped, this Xiao might still believe it. However, a couple just happened to escape, so how can this Xiao believe it? Since you were able to escape safely, you must have made a foolproof plan. Although I don't know what your shell race is like, this Xiao believes that in times of danger, the bad habit of letting the clan leader, elders, and other higher-ups leave first isn't something that only my human race has. No matter what, the shell race has to let the descendants of the royal family leave first with the pure bloodline of the shell race. Moreover, I also believe that you two aren't the only ones who made such preparations. There must be other shell race members as well. All of you are using different spatial passageways. If I'm not wrong, these spatial passages are either unidirectional or destroyed after being used. As expected, it's just a guess. However, your guesses are more or less correct. Bei Xian nodded. However, this doesn't seem to be the root of your suspicions. That's right. Xiaohua nodded. Of course, this is just this Xiao's suspicion. There are two things that this Xiao thinks of. Two? So many? Bei Xian was shocked. I thought it was flawless. First of all, Xiaohua smiled slightly, as if he was facing death calmly. If the ending of the story is that you repay the kindness of a drop of water with a gushing spring, then your words are correct. It fits the identity of a pair of unfortunate mandarin ducks wandering in a different world. However, the real ending is that you repay kindness with enmity. You actually trapped this Xiao in your domain again. This can only mean that you already had the intention to silence me. Why do you treat your benefactor like this? That's because you're afraid that I will reveal your whereabouts. You're being hunted down by others. You two aren't an ordinary shell race couple, but the descendants of the shell race's royal family. You even have the mission of spreading your bloodline in this different world. So when you just left my domain, you already made preparations? These 3 cultivators are your reinforcements? Bei Xian's beautiful face flashed with surprise once again. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "That's right. This is only a kind of precaution. This Xiao also hopes that this Xiao's guess is false." However, when the 7-colored brilliance appeared again, this Xiao's heart had already turned cold. Xiaohua's expression became even colder. This Xiao knows that this Xiao is still wrong. Since you're the descendants of the royal family, no matter if it's the human race or the shell race, your heart and blood are all cold. You only have the royal family's mission in your hearts. The royal family's mission is not necessarily true. Bei Xian shook her head. Protecting your life is the most important thing. I definitely can't let the news of me and Bei Ming leak out. Therefore, you have to die. As she spoke, Bei Xian looked at Tianrin, Shi and Qixi sighed and said, "You didn't pull them in to help you, but to send them to their deaths. Are you that confident?" Xiaohua's expression turned cold. Of course. Bei Xian faintly smiled. The entire space was like spring flowers blooming. This is my big 7-colored brilliance shell world, not your domain. In this shell world I am a god. An unparalleled god. Hee. Xiaohua's eyes curved like 2 crescent moons. Could it be that you're not curious about the second reason why I guessed your true goal? Bei Xian's expression didn't change at all. However, her lips slightly shrank as if she was lightly biting them with her teeth. After a moment, Bei Xian actually stretched lazily. The bulge in front of her chest proudly rose into the air. Although Xiaohua knew that this was all an illusion, he couldn't help but feel his mouth go dry. If you're willing to say it, then say it. Bei Xian said with a smile. The more I listen to you, the more I find you interesting. I really can't bear to kill you. Right now, I'm considering whether or not I should keep you here to be happy with me every day. Chapter 4395. Don't. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand. If that's the case, won't that Bei Ming from the Rainbow Conch kill me? He's still a child. How can he be your opponent? Bei Xian smiled like a flower. But it's strange. Why does he look like he's only 20,000 years old? How would I know? Xiao Hua spread his hands, indicating that he knew nothing about this. So you don't have to worry. Bei Xian smiled again. Even if he's able to break away from being a child in a few years, he might not know how to be jealous. Sweat. Xiaohua thought of Bei Xian's age and couldn't help but feel nauseous. Besides, Bei Xian continued happily, even if he's mature now, he definitely won't be jealous. Because he and I aren't a couple. Ah? Xiaohua was stunned, but then he understood and nodded. I understand. You saw that Fairy Jing sacrificed her life to save me, so you used the feelings between couples to move me. You're really smart. Bei Xian sighed. That's right. My Red Ocean Domain's shell race doesn't need couples to reproduce. The so-called couples are just a pastime. Bei Ming is just my clan brother. For your clan brother, you've been searching for so long? Xiaohua asked with a double meaning. Of course, Bei Xian smiled. Although he's my clan brother, we're all descendants of the sea god and have the same bloodline. Besides, whether the Red Ocean Domain still exists or not is another matter. He and I might be the only two descendants of the sea god left in this world. We can be considered a lonely pair. Bei Xian wasn't in a hurry to kill him and instead seemed to be in a good mood. In particular, she didn't ask him the same questions as before. Instead, she asked him the second reason why he saw through her thoughts. Xiaohua's heart became more and more confident. He smiled and said, if that's the case, then this Xiao was wrong about you. Kinship actually has a place in your hearts. It's really rare. Although my shell race isn't a human race, we still have flesh and blood. How can we be as cold as you say? Bei Xian was even more determined to keep Xiaohua here. Naturally, she wasn't in a hurry. Your Excellency, you're not looking for Bei Ming, but for the statue of the sea god, right? Xiaohua suddenly asked. Bei Xian was startled. The entire seven-colored shell world dimmed. How did you know? This is naturally one of the reasons why I was able to guess your true intentions. Xiaohua said with a smile. If it were an ordinary couple from the Shell clan, how could they carry the statue that represents the dignity of the sea god with them? They probably won't even be able to see it, right? I really admire you. Bei Xian was speechless. Do you have 5 bodies? Xiaohua asked very happily. Xiaohua was happy, but Bei Xian was unhappy. She reluctantly shook her chest, blinked her eyes, and said, 3 body is fine, right? 3 bodies? Xiaohua was a bit confused. However, when he saw Bei Xian's swaying waist, he helplessly retreated and raised his gaze. So, in the eyes of the descendants of the royal clan, there is no kinship. There is only power and responsibility. Xiaohua said word by word, your goal of sucking me into the 7-colored shell world again, other than to kill me, I'm afraid you also want to interrogate Shang Huaming's whereabouts, interrogate him about the whereabouts of the statue, right? Human race, oh human race. Bei Xian sighed again. I really want to take out your head and see how it grows. Are you a roundworm in my stomach? You even know what I'm thinking? I'm truly speechless. AI. Xiaohua's tone was abnormally lonely. You're destined to not be able to see what I'm thinking. I'm also destined to not be your roundworm. At this point, Bei Xian couldn't be bothered to say anything more. She said, actually, when you said you saw Bei Ming's true body, my heart skipped a beat. My worries for the past 200 years have finally come true. Because what I need isn't Bei Ming, but that statue of the sea god. That statue contains the inheritance of my Shell clan, and it also contains something necessary for the awakening of my Shell clan's divine body. I don't quite understand how Bei Ming could become a child. But since he's become a child, then the statue of the sea god definitely isn't on him. Then where is the statue of the sea god? I think, since you've seen it, then it must be Shang Huaming. So at first, I wanted to pretend that I knew about Shang Huaming. But later on, I thought that if I knew about Shang Huaming, you would definitely try to test me again. So, I simply admitted that I didn't know about Shanghua Ming and told you everything. But for Bei Ming, why should I be afraid of erasing the memories of your substitute? I could have searched his soul long ago. But for the sake of my Shell clan's only hope, I didn't dare to act rashly. Can you act now? Xiaohua smiled. Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to find the statue of the sea god? At this point, Xiaohua's expression suddenly froze, revealing a bitter expression. I'm sure you understand. Bei Xian'er smiled. If the statue of the sea god is on you, I only need to kill you. Then wouldn't the statue of the sea god be mine? If the statue of the sea god isn't on you, then it must be on Shanghua Ming. Since I know about Shanghua Ming, then what value do you have? If I kill you, not only can I ensure that my whereabouts aren't leaked, but I can also ensure that the news of the statue of the sea god isn't leaked. Moreover, if you're sent by the Sea Clan, I can even avenge the deaths of my Shell Clan's compatriots. Is this the legendary, killing 3 birds with 1 stone? Alas, looks like you're determined to kill me. Xiaohua said helplessly. Yes. I was originally hesitant, but you're really too smart. Oh, has anyone ever said that you're as meticulous as silk and as sweet as honey? Bei Xian'er suddenly asked. Xiaohua was slightly taken aback. He shook his head slightly and said, No. Isn't Fairy Jing sacrificing her life for you because she loves you so much? Bei Xian'er smiled. I'm also afraid of falling into your evil hands, so I'd better kill you first. Really heartless. Xiaohua stroked his chin and sighed. If you love someone, do you have to let them die? You're really thinking too much. Bei Xian'er pursed her lips and smiled. You should become a ranger. Maybe you'll capture the hearts of many chivalrous women. Looking at Bei Xian'er's smile, how could it be that she was going to kill him? Xiaohua smiled and said, I wonder if this item will be able to capture your heart? As he spoke, Xiaohua raised his hand and took out an object from his bosom and threw it into the air. In the air, the statue of the sea god suddenly emerged from the 7-colored threads of light. Although it was ordinary and lightless, in Bei Xian'er's eyes, Bei Xian'er's complexion changed greatly. Her body trembled and she almost collapsed. She screamed and was about to fall to the ground, but the moment her body transformed, Bei Xian'er suddenly raised her head. Her face was already ferocious. Boom! A thunderous roar exploded from the statue of the sea god, and the surrounding several li were filled with boiling threads of light. However, there were no fragments of the statue. It turned out that the statue of the sea god was just a phantom that Xiaohua waved. Damned humans! Bei Xian'er shouted. Her body suddenly expanded and occupied more than half of the space in an instant. You actually dare to scare me. If I don't kill you today, I swear I'm not human. Ha! Xiaohua laughed and said confidently, if you can't kill me, you don't have to regret it. You're not human at all. Damn it! Bei Xian'er cursed angrily. Xiaohua didn't see any movement from her, but he felt that countless tides began to surge around him. Waves of spatial power several times more ferocious than the collapse of heaven and earth rushed out from the void, violently wanting to tear his body apart. Troublesome. Although Xiaohua laughed, his heart was extremely bitter. He had just returned to the 3 continents, and the first thing he did was to oppose the South Sea Dragon Palace. He encountered the 4 Seas Great Array, faced the 4 Sea Dragon Kings, and fought the 4 Great Dragon Emperors. Now, he had reached the 1,000 Beast Sacred Realm. Not only did he have to fight against the 3 great sages of the demon race, he also had to resist the killing intent of the great sage ancestor in the Great Rainbow Halo Shell world. If he faced this so-called ancestor directly, Xiaohua might have some confidence. However, Xiaohua understood that this Great Rainbow Halo Shell world was constructed by Bei Xian'er's shell. It could be said that it was Bei Xian'er's life boundary. This was different from the 4 Seas Great Array or the Dragon Emperor Great Array of the 4 Seas Dragon Palace. The 4 Seas Great Array required the 4 Great Dragon Emperors as the eye of the array, which was activated by the 4 Sea Dragon Kings. In this Great Rainbow Halo Shell world, there was no eye of the array. This barrier itself was Bei Xian'er. All the attacks within the barrier could be created with just a thought from Bei Xian. Just as she had said earlier, she was the god within this barrier. Even if Xiao Hua had heaven-defying divine abilities, he would still be restricted by her in this barrier. This was also the fundamental reason why Xiao Hua's space couldn't be sensed in this great rainbow halo shell world. Seeing the incomparably valiant power of space attacking him and his domain instantly shattering, Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. He hurriedly urged his magic power and was just about to use a thunderbolt technique. But right at this moment, waves of indescribable fluctuations came from afar. Everywhere these fluctuations passed, all of the spatial energy was erased, and all of the shattered space disappeared. In front of Xiao Hua's eyes was still a seven-colored barrier flickering with light. Ha! Bei Xian's surprised voice rang out, rippling in the nearby space. What is this? As she spoke, a golden tentacle appeared out of thin air and fell on the Celestial's shoulder. Over there, the dream mirage butterfly flapped its wings. Waves of fluctuations were generated, breaking the illusion of the great rainbow halo shell world. I was lucky. Xiao Hua breathed a sigh of relief. He had previously seen the situation of Little White Dragon and Bai Bo in the illusion, so he knew that the illusion of this great rainbow halo shell world was formidable. Before entering, he had taken out the dream mirage butterfly from the space in advance. He didn't expect that it would really be useful. Otherwise, Bei Xian wouldn't have needed to use any tricks, and Xiao Hua would have fought with himself. Chapter 4396. Get your filthy hands off me, old beggar. In the eyes of the Celestial, Bei Xian was nothing but a skeleton. He gave a loud cry and stretched out one of his 6 arms, which then transformed into a mountain range and landed on Bei Xian's tentacle. Immediately, the tentacle crumbled and turned into a blue color with golden threads. Woo! The Celestial opened his mouth again, and the blue threads turned into a thin shadow and fell into his mouth. This is... Bei Xian was taken aback when she saw the blue shadow fly away. But before she could cry out in surprise, the Celestial opened his other mouth again, and another faint blood-red shadow emerged behind the golden threads. Damn it! Bei Xian roared furiously. Boom, 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 boom. The golden threads exploded at the same time, blocking the Celestial's suction force and causing the blood-red shadow to vanish instantly. Boom! Right after the blood-red shadow disappeared, the Celestial's 2 arms stretched out of thin air and landed on the rainbow barrier. Open! The Celestial roared furiously. His skinny arms strangely gripped the space, and as he exerted his strength, the space was torn apart like silk. The crack easily expanded and spread toward Bei Xian, who looked like a god. Bei Xian snorted coldly. Then, a huge reef emerged like a star, and smashed toward the Celestial like a meteor. The meteor produced a whistling noise, causing the entire space to tremble. It was quite different from the previous strange phenomenon. Another rock falling down. The Celestial sneered. You are indeed an old beggar. Can't you have any other tricks up your sleeves? As the Celestial spoke, 3 beams of different colors shot out from his 3 heads and tore apart the rainbow barrier. Then he waved his 6 arms at the same time, smashed the reef, and strode toward Bei Xian. Reverend Yun threw his head back and let out a long and sonorous roar when he heard the loud noises of breaking the reef. His dragon roar shattered countless rainbow light threads. Since you dare to provoke I'll show you what I can do. As he spoke, Reverend Yun's dragon body began to sway. Even before he launched the real attack, a boundless golden light flashed out of his dragon body, within which were dragon runes that blotted the sky and the earth as they thrust towards the great rainbow shell world. Wherever the dragon runes passed, they would be devoured, and as Reverend Yun's dragon body stretched for over 1,000 miles, the dragon runes had occupied the entire space within several thousand miles. Then, where did the dragon race come from? How could he be so powerful? Don't tell me there are dragons stronger than the profound armored pentahorn dragon in the 4 seas? Bei Xian was completely dumbfounded. Old beggar, there's always someone better than you. Don't think that just because you're some ancestor, you're not afraid of being looked down upon by others." Reverend Yun grinned coldly, then opened his mouth and unleashed the heavenly dragon speech magic again. Suddenly, some natural energies were produced in the shell, which transformed into countless fireballs and flew towards Bei Sienna. Reverend Yun even reached out his golden claws and grabbed at the barrier. Similarly, the barrier was shattered by the dragon claws, and the colorful shadows were fleeing desperately like swimming fishes. Hee. Seeing that Reverend Tianren Yun had made his move, Shi dared not to be careless. The corners of his mouth curved into a cute smile, then he raised a hand and slapped his own head. Boom! Countless streams of fiend energy and fiend flame towered into the sky. The fiend hand transformed into a huge pitch-black hand that glinted with a blood-red gleam, grabbing at another space. It was like a layer of silk that was spread out in the air, as 100 miles wide spatial folds were pulled up by the huge hand. Amidst the spatial folds, the colorful shadows were twisting like little tadpoles, trying to swim but having no strength to swing their tails. Are you really a fiend? Bei Sienna could not find Shi's true form even though he was inside her own barrier, and she thought he was just an illusory fiend form. But when she saw the extremely pure fiend energy, which was even higher grade than that of ordinary fiends, she could not help but be surprised again. Ha! Shi opened his mouth and let out a very tempting and wild laugh. The sound echoed in the air and shook the seven-colored light. That's right, I'm a fiend. What do you think? Do you like me? Old beggar, do you want to taste something new? I'm a little fresh meat. I don't mind teaching you some new postures. Following this voice, layers of crimson-red devil chi appeared around Shi's body, and within this devil chi, many illusions appeared. In the illusion, there were human beings, spirit creatures, dragons, ocean-kind beings, and even insects, mosquitoes, and flies. Regardless of whether they were human beings or mosquitoes, they were all crazily copulating with each other. Strange auras and desires seeped out from the evil chi. Hee. Bei Sienna smiled. Her voice, which was like the sound of nature, echoed in the entire barrier. So, you like this? Not bad, not bad. Look at your firm muscles. I think I can enjoy it. Of course. Shi answered proudly. His fiend body suddenly expanded, reaching a height of 1,000 miles. The demonic armor and other items that had covered his body earlier were all hidden within his body. The muscles on the surface of his body swam like horned dragons. The masculine lines on his body were exceptionally eye-catching under the pitch-black, night-like seven-colored light. Although Shi's appearance was revealed, it was no longer Xiaohua's appearance. Instead, it was abnormally handsome. He was truly a peerless talent. His eyebrows were filled with a kind of frivolity. That frivolous aura seemed to disperse the entire space. If I wasn't strong, how could I deal with you? If I don't make you wish you were dead, I won't be a fiend. Damn it. Hearing Shi's words, which were even more vulgar than those of a street scoundrel, Bei Sienna, who was the descendant of the Shell clan's royal family, couldn't bear it anymore. With a tsunami-like roar, several vortexes, which were hundreds of miles wide, passed through the space and directly fell on Shi's fiend body. Damn it. Shi saw that the vortexes were filled with the power of space. Inside the vortexes, there were countless seven-colored light threads crazily rotating. His face changed slightly as he cursed. I just said a few words and you're angry? If you don't want me to do it, why are you so naked? Are you showing off your own body? Shi cursed, but his movements weren't slow. With a raise of his hand, the scarlet demonic chi immediately flew out. It also turned into a demonic pillar that was hundreds of miles wide and stabbed towards the vortexes. Buzz buzz. A series of loud rumbling noises came from the vortex. Countless devils within the devil chi intertwined with the seven-colored threads of light, either devouring or tearing at them. The moment the vortex was wiped out, the rumbling noises turned into shameless moans of lust. The devils even took on the appearance of slaughter and charged toward the vortex. Seeing Shi's methods, Xiaohua laughed loudly. He felt that he had vented his anger. Human. While Xiaohua was laughing, a voice came from behind him. I have to admit that you are the most powerful opponent I have seen in the 3 continents. Is that so? This Xiao is extremely honored. Xiaohua turned around with a smile on his face. He looked at Bei Xian, who was already wearing the 7-colored clothes, and said indifferently, "However, even if you're a hero, once you're in my 7-colored shell world, you can only be a coward." As Bei Xian spoke, her expression suddenly changed and she shouted, "Kill!" Following Bei Xian's shout, 3 more similar shouts came from the nearby space. After the space in front of Qi, Shi, and Celestial was torn apart, 3 figures that looked exactly like Bei Xian appeared. Each of them had a cold expression on their faces. Xiaohua didn't doubt Bei Xian's doppelganger ability in the 7-colored light shell world at all. He pinched his chin with a smile on his face and looked meaningfully at Bei Xian. "What, do you like bears?" Looking at the smile in Xiaohua's eyes, Bei Xian became even angrier. She raised a hand and waved it. An arm as big as a mountain came whistling through the air, accompanied by a rumbling sound like a tsunami. An extremely powerful force of space came rushing over and smashed into the edge of Xiaohua's domain. Boom, boom, boom. Countless lightning threads were shattered, and the domain collapsed. The broken spatial folds rushed toward Xiaohua like a tidal wave. However, Xiaohua did not panic in the face of such a powerful attack, nor did he exert any magic power. Instead, there was a faint smile on his face. When the force of space came within 100 miles of him, he opened his mouth slightly and spat out a wisp of snow-white light. Meanwhile, Reverend Yun was waving his dragon body and exercising the heavenly dragon speech magic. The space of several thousand miles to his left was filled with dragon runes, and the 7-colored light threads were devoured by them. There were even fireballs in the nearby void. Reverend Yun grinned coldly and cried out into the distance, "So this is what the so-called descendants of the Shell clan are capable of." While speaking, Reverend Yun stretched out his 5 claws again and grabbed at the space. Immediately, one spatial crack after another appeared, spreading out in all directions like cracks in glass. Of course, Reverend Yun would not be fooled by this. He waved his dragon tail again and smashed it on the spatial crack. The 7-colored light threads within several thousand miles were shattered, and a series of rumbling noises spread into the depths of the space. Roar! Reverend Yun gave a furious roar. A golden light burst out from his dragon body as he thrust his dragon body once again toward the rumbling noises. Reverend Yun knew that Xiaohua's main purpose of summoning him out of the space was to help him break the great 7-colored shell realm. However, Reverend Yun had also told Xiaohua that the Pango axe was capable of cutting Bei Xian's shell realm in half. However, Reverend Yun had tried his best to wield the Pango axe in the South Sea Dragon Palace. How long had it been? Reverend Yun might be able to lift the Pango axe, but it was absolutely impossible for him to wield it. Otherwise, Reverend Yun would have used the Pango axe when he entered the great 7-colored shell realm. Chapter 4397. Xiaohua felt helpless when he saw that. However, he knew very well that although Bei Xian was said to be the master of this shell realm, she was like a god in this barrier. Nevertheless, Xiaohua had his own dimension, and his control of this dimension was not weaker than Bei Xian. Furthermore, Xiaohua understood that the shell realm was different from his own dimension. The shell realm had the effect of Bei Xian's natal shell, and was also the effect of her divine ability. Perhaps he was not Bei Xian's match, but Reverend Yun, Shi, and Celestial might not necessarily be her match. As long as the 4 of them could defeat Bei Xian, they would be able to break through the rainbow light shell world. Of course, as Bei Xian had said, she was omnipotent in this barrier. What she faced with Xiaohua and the others was just an incorporeal body condensed from light threads. In order to defeat her, they had to find her true form, or find the edge of the shell realm, which was the true form of the shell. Therefore, when Reverend Yun saw the void shattered, his dragon body flew towards the depths of the dimension. Although he could not sense the location of Bei Xian's true form, he could still fly to the edge of the dimension with his own overall strength. Kill! Reverend Yun flew for several tens of thousands of miles, and the dimension within the barrier was shattered by his mighty dragon body. When Reverend Yun opened his mouth again and sprayed out another mouthful of dragon breath, trying to extinguish the seven-colored light within a 100 miles radius, a furious cry rang out. Bei Xian'er's illusory figure had once again appeared before Reverend Yun. Reverend Yun grinned coldly as the dragon breath fell towards Bei Xian'er. Bei Xian'er had a serious look in her eyes, but the expression on her face was somewhat contemptuous. She snorted coldly and said, "Boorish fellow." After that, Bei Xian'er raised her hand and waved it in the air. As if she was gently stroking a bronze mirror, a seven-colored barrier measuring several hundred miles in size emerged out of thin air. Inside the seven-colored barrier, countless splashes of water seemed to dance in the sea breeze. Boom! The dragon breath smashed onto the seven-colored barrier and produced a muffled vibration. Under the dragon breath, the barrier quickly dissolved, and streams of seven-colored light exploded in midair. Bei Xian'er was taken aback for a moment, but then she waved both hands again. Woo! The barrier suddenly shattered completely, some of them plunging into the void, some shooting towards Reverend Yun. In just a few breaths of time, the broken pieces of the barrier had completely enveloped Reverend Yun. Combine! Bei Xian'er cried out softly. Immediately, all the broken pieces began to flicker with a bright glow, transforming into a shackle and falling towards Reverend Yun's dragon body. It was a very powerful shackle, as it had completely confined the space within 1,000 miles around Reverend Yun. Even when Reverend Yun unleashed his dragon aura mixed with a golden beam, he could not break the shackle. Boom! Boom! The space within several thousand miles was shaking violently, as if the heaven and earth were closing up. Reverend Yun's body gradually turned stiff, as if he was really going to be imprisoned by Bei Xian. Reverend Yun did not show any sign of panic. He slightly raised his 5 golden claws and grabbed onto the shackle again. As a result, the huge shackle seemed to be held up by a jade pillar, and it was difficult for them to close even a little bit. Immediately after that, the dragon horn on Reverend Yun's forehead shone with a 9-colored brilliance as well. The brilliance was a few times stronger than Bei Xian'er's 7-colored brilliance. Wherever the brilliance passed, the huge shackle would shatter into pieces, sending the broken shackles into the surrounding space. Damn it! In the face of such a formidable dragon, Bei Xian'er looked somewhat powerless. She cursed under her breath and raised her right hand again. Boom! A huge fist flashed and vanished, and after a few breaths of time, it reappeared in front of Reverend Yun. Reverend Yun opened his mouth and shot out a beam of light, which smashed right into the fist. The light beam pierced through the entire fist, causing it to slowly vanish into thin air. However, right at the moment when it disappeared, the fist suddenly flashed again. Taking the opportunity when Reverend Yun raised his head to look at Bei Xian'er, it vanished into the barrier. When it reappeared, it had already landed right next to the golden barrier protecting Reverend Yun's body. Boom! The golden barrier shattered with a loud boom, and the fist hit right onto Reverend Yun's back. Roar! Reverend Yun howled. A few scales on his back were shattered, and streams of dragon blood were oozing out. Haha! Bei Xian'er laughed complacently after her successful attack. The dragons of the 3 continents are indeed tender and adorable. But too bad, before she could finish talking about the victory, Reverend Yun's dragon body, which was twisting painfully, suddenly vanished as well. After that, Bei Xian'er felt a suffocating aura pressing down from the barrier above her head. Who is it? Bei Xian'er was greatly shocked, as she could not think of anyone who could escape from her perception within the barrier. Right when the question came out of her mouth, Reverend Yun's huge dragon tail came smashing down amidst the 7-colored glow of the defensive barrier, smashing right onto her head. How is this possible? Although Bei Xian'er was surprised, she waved her left hand and unleashed another 7-colored barrier, trying to fend off Reverend Yun's attack. But this time, Bei Xian'er would be disappointed. The dragon tail's aura was extremely powerful, and the dragon's breath was as boundless as the sea. The force of its descent was like a hot knife through butter, shattering the barrier in an instant. The dragon's tail didn't even slow down as it struck Bei Xian'er's body. Schwa. Of course, Bei Xian-er's illusory body wasn't destroyed, but the light it emitted was weakened by 40%. Damn it. Bei Xian-er cursed angrily again, as her body suddenly transformed into a shell. After that, the 7 colors on the shell transformed into one huge light wheel after another, producing the sound of a tsunami as they smashed towards Reverend Yun. Buzz, 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 swish, swish, swish. The sound of the tsunami caused the space within a radius of 10,000 kilometers to spin, and the wheel of light collided with it without any pattern. Not good. A strange feeling of dizziness came from Reverend Yun's mind, and he could not even maintain his balance with his huge body, as he was swaying uncontrollably in the air. Schwa! One of the light wheels landed on Reverend Yun's body and cut through one of his scales, as if the indestructible dragon scale had turned into an ordinary beast's skin. Reverend Yun felt a great pain. He opened his mouth and roared furiously, then with a sway of his dragon body, he shot straight up into the sky. After flying for over 100 miles, Reverend Yun raised his head slightly and gave another loud roar. After that, the dragon runes all over his body began to emerge from his skin, transforming into a light screen that rippled across his skin. Meanwhile, the 9-colored halo around his dragon horns began to grow denser, and the soul-shaking dragon pressure was increasing at an incredible rate. Break! As Reverend Yun let out a furious roar that sounded like the language of dragons, the light screen around his body rushed into his dragon horn. The 9-colored halo rippled and brought the light screen out of the dragon horn, transforming into a shadow of a dragon and pouncing towards Bei Xian. The shadow of the dragon was very strange. Not only were there light shadows and ripples in it, but there was also a very strong dragon pressure. Wherever the shadow passed, the spinning space would be restored, and the dizzying sound would disappear amidst the ripples. Even Bei Xian-er's body was trembling under the pressure of the dragon pressure. The 7-colored halo unleashed by Bei Xian-er could not stop the shadow of the dragon. It was like countless silkworms were devouring mulberry leaves, and a faint and disorderly noise was heard when the shadow of the dragon landed on Bei Xian-er's body. Swish, swish, swish. The shadow of Bei Xian-er's halo grew weaker again. Hee. Reverend Yun laughed insidiously. He gave up on attacking Bei Xian, then controlled his dragon body and flew towards the depths of the space. He knew clearly that Bei Xian would still be waiting for him at the end of the space. As long as he destroyed Bei Xian-er's shadow again and again, he would be able to force Bei Xian-er's true form to show up. Sure enough, wherever the dragon body passed, the 7-colored halo would explode. At the end of the 7-colored halo barrier, Bei Xian-er appeared once again, gnashing her teeth in anger. The battle between the Daoist and Bei Xian was different now. Right when the Daoist destroyed the reef controlled by Bei Xian-er and took a step forward to tear the space apart, Bei Xian-er's body suddenly vanished in a bizarre manner. The heavenly being was stunned for a moment, and then a disdainful smile appeared on all 3 of its heads. After that, it didn't stop and flew in a certain direction. As it flew, its 3 mouths spat out beams of light that destroyed the space in its path. Boom, boom, boom. The collapsed space actually formed the outline of a huge tunnel. Furthermore, the space destroyed by the Daoist was different from the space destroyed by Reverend Yun, as the 7-colored light threads could not restore the space. While the Daoist's 6 arms were waving, more inexplicable ripples seeped out from the gaps in the void and fell into the broken space, turning it into a chaotic state. Not only were the 7-colored halos devoured by the chaos, even some of the shadows were sucked into it and vanished. Kill. Following a coquettish grumble, Bei Xian once again revealed her figure at the side of the chaotic space. This time, Bei Xian was no longer in her human form. Instead, she looked like a cuttlefish. Her 8 waving tentacles were all covered with sharp spikes. In fact, the spikes even flashed with an exceptionally bright radiance. Bei Xian showed no signs of stopping. Her tentacles, which looked like mountain ranges, danced in the sky and attacked the Daoist. The tentacles simply ignored space, and as soon as they whistled through the air, they had already arrived before the Daoist. After half a cup of tea's time, Bei Xian suddenly turned into a stream of light and disappeared. She then reappeared several hundred miles away. Her squid-like body swayed proudly as she laughed. "What a boorish fellow! Let's see how long you can last." Boom, boom, boom. The Daoist lowered his head to look at the cracks on his body and the pitch-black liquid flowing out from them. Ignoring them, he shot out beams of light again and continued to press toward Bei Xian. With every step he took, the 7 colored halos would be destroyed into chaos. Chapter 4398. Bei Xian's heart was bleeding when she saw another 1,000 miles of space being destroyed by the Celestial. The Great Rainbow Shell Realm was her natal boundary. If Reverend Yun destroyed the space, Bei Xian could repair it. What she lost was just some divine abilities. But the Celestial's attack was devastating. Bei Xian had no way to repair the space destroyed by the Celestial. What was lost was her natal boundary. Although the Great Rainbow Shell Realm looked boundless, it was because of Bei Xian's spatial restriction that Xiaohua and the others could not sense the boundary. But in fact, the Shell Realm had a boundary, and Bei Xian could not bear to throw away even an inch of space. But in order to kill the Celestial, Bei Xian gritted her teeth and endured it. However, even though 1,000 miles of space had been abandoned, the Celestial was still alive and kicking, without any signs of waiting for death. What? Bei Xian was dumbfounded. She looked at the cracks on the Celestial's body and asked in confusion, You weren't poisoned? Poisoned? The Celestial smiled. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he fell to the ground in midair. Huff! Bei Xian was about to catch her breath when she saw the Celestial raise his head and ask in bewilderment, Is that what you said? Do. Bei Xian felt that she was being teased, and her eyes were filled with hatred. The Celestial stood up in midair and patted his body, as if he had just climbed up from the ground. When his gaze once again landed on the crack, he waved his hand. The pitch-black liquid was wiped away, and the crack also disappeared. The Celestial looked at Bei Xian and said with a cunning smile, My clothes are dirty. I was pestered by you just now, so I didn't have time to clean them. Damn it! What kind of monster is this? Bei Xian could not help but groan. For the first time, she had a trace of doubt about her action of killing Xiaohua. But she only hesitated for a moment. Once again, a dazzling rainbow halo appeared around Bei Xian. The halo expanded and contracted a few times as if it was breathing, and finally condensed into a huge ring, which fell down towards the Celestial. Not good. Wherever the halo landed, a powerful aura appeared. Everything that came into contact with the halo was sucked into the halo. Even the 7 colored strands of light were killed by the halo. Seeing this, the Celestial was shocked. He opened his mouth and 3 beams of light shot into the sky, hitting the halo. Boom, boom, boom. The light pillars were very powerful. In an instant, they had caused the halo to dim. However, the halo was spinning rapidly and absorbed some of the light pillars. There was no special change in the power of the descending light pillars. The Deva slapped the top of his head, and the power of the Deva's bones erupted like a volcano. The halo couldn't hold on for much longer, and was sent flying hundreds of kilometers into the air, unable to fall back down for the time being. Boom, boom, boom. High up in the sky, 3 more explosions could be heard, and 3 more Bei Xian appeared on the halo. Without any hesitation, the 3 rainbow-colored figures landed on 3 different parts of the light. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. And at this time, in the sky near the Celestial, the 7-colored halo condensed into strange demon characters that were several kilometers in size. These demon characters had some blood-red color, and also gave off an indescribable power. Although this power could not block the might of the Deva's bones, it could still somewhat block it. Boom, 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 boom. 4 more explosions could be heard, and 4 more 7-colored Bei Xian landed on the halo. Woo woo. This time, the huge halo made a powerful whistling sound and fell down on the Celestial. Oh my God! The Celestial was shocked. He waved his 6 arms and hurriedly retreated, trying to avoid the halo. Unfortunately, he had only dodged 1,000 kilometers, but the halo also chased after him for 1,000 kilometers. It fell down aggressively from the top of the Celestial's head to the bottom of his feet. Wherever the halo passed, the Celestial's defense disappeared, and even the illusionary Daoist robe disappeared. The Celestial's true body was revealed. Outside of the golden skin, 30% of the green was mixed with blue and purple. It looked very strange. Wherever the halo passed, the green increased by 10% and the golden color disappeared by a little. The halo also shrank by a little. Damn it! The Celestial's face turned pale, and he hurriedly tried to escape. Woo-woo. Unfortunately, the halo had already landed on the Celestial's body. How could he escape? With a loud explosion, the halo rose from the bottom of the Celestial's feet to the top of his head. Again, the golden color disappeared by a little. What are you doing? The Celestial screamed and fled like a headless fly. The halo crazily swept around the Celestial's body. In the end, the halo disappeared, and the golden color around the Celestial was also gone. His whole body was dyed green, and in this green, blue and purple were spread out like a spider web. The Celestial was now satisfied. He stood in midair and said shyly, "You want to see my body? You should have said so earlier. If you had said so, why would you need to do it? Why don't I just take off my clothes myself?" Puff! Bei Xian's dim body revealed itself in a corner of the void. She opened her mouth and spat out a black beam of 7-colored light. It looked as if she had just coughed up blood. At this point in time, when she looked at the Celestial's expression and his vigorous appearance, Bei Xian knew that she had fallen into his trap again. She had used up so many 7-colored halos formed by her clones, but not only did she fail to destroy the 5 elements items in the Celestial's body, she had even aided him in some kind of divine ability. She had gone for wool but come home shorn. This fellow's skin is tough and his flesh is thick. I'm afraid ordinary means won't work. Looks like I have to resort to my last resort. Bei Xian squinted at the Celestial and thought to herself. Reverend Yun and the Celestial were fighting Bei Xian in 2 different places. Although they had gained a slight upper hand in the battle, their fight was not as fierce as the one between Shi and Bei Xian. Meanwhile, Bei Xian was controlling the 7-colored halos to transform into countless vortexes, trying to kill Shi. However, the vortexes were pierced by countless fiend pillars. It was not a big deal if they only pierced through the vortexes, but when the fiend pillars landed, the halos of the vortexes were shattered, revealing countless fiends in the fiend energies. Inside the halos, there was the image of yin and yang intersecting with each other, and the void was filled with fiend voices. Bei Xian did not know about this before, but when these fiends were born, she finally realized it. Damn it! Bei Xian flew into a rage, and her face turned pink. Immediately after that, countless 7-colored halos burst out from the 1,000-mile space where Shi was again. These halos transformed into sharp thorns, about a few miles long, and thrust toward Shi from all directions. Before these sharp thorns could land, the domain around Shi had already begun to crumble, and the fiends that supported the domain were howling and exploding one after another. Obviously, Bei Xian hated Shi to the core. So it's a rose with thorns. You might even prick this daddy's hand. Shi laughed loudly. His entire demonic body collapsed with a loud bang. Tens of thousands of layers of demonic flames surged out from his body. Numerous demons, whose strength was not inferior to the Devil King's, appeared from within the demonic flames. These demons clustered together and formed a strange demonic array. This demonic array turned into numerous huge demonic runes that pounced in all directions as the blood-red light gushed out. Boom, boom, boom. The sharp thorns fell into the fiend runes, and the halos on the thorns transformed into tens of thousands of light rays that fell into the fiends' bodies. The fiends exploded one by one, creating an enormous power. Amidst the explosions, the fiend energies spread even more wildly, and the 7-colored halos took advantage of this opportunity to penetrate into the depths of the fiend energies. After a while, the fiend energies spread out for tens of thousands of miles, But at the center of the fiend energies, the seven-colored halos also condensed into a seven-edged light shadow. Whoosh! Once the seven-edged light shadow formed, the seven-colored brilliance instantly disappeared. Then, a layer of milky white holy brilliance emerged from the seven-edged light shadow. The moment this brilliance appeared, it transformed into Bei Xian's human form and swept towards the fiend energies in the surroundings. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Faster than ice meeting boiling water, all the fiend energies were instantly obliterated upon contact with this holy brilliance. No matter how arrogant the devil flames within the fiend energies were, no matter how rampant the fiends were, they were all destroyed. Damn it, what is this? Shi's voice resounded within tens of thousands of miles, and it was as if tens of thousands of fiends were roaring at the same time. Ha! Bei Xian's voice was filled with the pride of victory within the fiend energies. You're just a devil sovereign, yet you dare to be so arrogant in front of my seven-colored shell clan? Don't you know that my seven-colored shell clan is born with the ability to restrain the devil race? In just a few words, the fiend energies within 1,000 miles were swept away. However, the holy brilliance within this space had also dimmed by a lot. Since ancient times, there's a saying that when the Tao is 1 foot tall, the devil is 10 feet tall. You're just some insignificant talent, yet you dare to show off in front of this sovereign? Once Shi saw that Bei Xian was weakened, he immediately stirred up the fiend energies. Layers of devil flames were like a crimson blood tide as they ferociously pounced towards the holy brilliance that Bei Xian had transformed into. Bei Xian snorted coldly. Within 1,000 miles of empty space, countless seven-colored strands of light surged in through an indescribable void. Like a myriad of streams returning to their source, they fell into the holy brilliance. Pung! The holy brilliance flourished and once again swept in all directions. Ha! Shi laughed loudly and said, "The ancients often say that those with big breasts have no brains. Damn it, you really don't have brains. Can't you see that this is your father's trick to lure the enemy?" As he spoke, a layer of silvery white luster suddenly appeared within the fiend energies that had been destroyed by the holy brilliance. When the holy brilliance landed on this silvery white luster, it was like a wheat tip piercing through a steel plate, breaking inch by inch. Not only that, after the luster died the fiend energies were like silver snow waves that swept towards Bei Xian. That ferocious aura was exactly the same as when Bei Xian had destroyed the fiend energies. Chapter 4399. Innate. Metal Chi? Bei Xian's expression changed and she screamed, "You're a demon sovereign? How can you have such an innate yang item?" As she spoke, Bei Xian's figure flashed and disappeared. However, a moment later, the area covered by the demon chi flashed with a strong silver light, and Bei Xian's figure appeared in that area, looking quite miserable. "Haha!" Shi shouted loudly. "If I didn't have this item, how could I be called Shi? Listen to me obediently, and I will make you wish you were dead." Shi laughed arrogantly. The demon chi within 1,000 miles of space turned into his demon body, and he pounced on Bei Xian. Bei Xian's body was trembling slightly, and the light around her was like a candle in the wind, flickering from time to time. The space within 1,000 miles was once again filled with silvery white demonic chi. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Bei Xian abruptly raised her head. The holy light around her suddenly turned into 7 colors. At the same time, threads of light surged out from the void like a tidal wave and crashed into her body. "You've been fooled." Bei Xian chuckled softly. Her entire body transformed into a rainbow-colored hurricane that charged towards the silver-white demonic chi. "Within my great rainbow-colored shell world, as long as you possess the 5 elements, you will be countered by me. Although you are a Xiantian metal object, I can still kill you." Sure enough, wherever the rainbow-colored whirlwind passed, the silver-white devil chi was instantly shattered, and a huge hole was created in the devil chi. Bei Xian's body flew freely in the devil chi without any hindrance. Ha ha! Bei Xian couldn't help but laugh again. Facing the demon sovereign's innate nemesis, there was always a trace of unease in the bottom of her heart. Now that she saw the demon Qi being exterminated, and countless demons being exterminated within the seven-colored brilliance, a sense of satisfaction involuntarily emerged. However, after a few minutes, Bei Xian suddenly felt that something was wrong. After the demonic Qi was destroyed, the seven-colored strands of light did not appear. Instead, the monstrous blood gradually seeped out from the surroundings. Bei Xian felt a bit dizzy even in her own seven-colored shell world. She involuntarily stopped and looked around in confusion. See! Bei Xian couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air because the devil Qi at this time was no longer devil Qi. It was a mixture of devil flame and devil blood, devil head and blood filth mixed together. Whether it was her eyes or her Yuan Shen, there was no end to the devil Qi. There was also no end to the twisting and turning blood tunnel. Bei Xian had actually fallen into the devil array. Bei Xian was both embarrassed and angry. However, Shi's voice didn't come, as if he was tired of her stubbornness and had abandoned her. Damn it! Bei Xian suddenly had a bad feeling. Her body frantically transformed once again. At this moment, Shi's unhurried voice rang out again, "Little Bei Bei, it's better for you to obediently follow this sovereign." Bei Xian was infuriated. She had been playing hard to get, trying to kill Shi. However, she didn't expect that in the end, she would still fall into his demonic array. Bei Xian's gaze swept across the bloodstains that were ready to move, as well as the devils that were revealed within the bloodstains. These devils, without exception, all had extremely handsome appearances. Bei Xian said, "Other than trapping me, do you have any other motives? Could it be that you didn't feel it?" All the devil heads answered in unison, "Could it be that you didn't know what I was doing outside the devil array?" When Bei Xian heard this, she thought for a moment, and her expression changed greatly. She said in shock, "You wanted to use the opportunity of trapping me to find the location of my real body?" "Ioyo." All the devil heads revealed Shi's arrogant smile, "You can't be so smart. If you are smart, your chest will become smaller." Bei Xian's mouth was bitter. Now that she was trapped in the devil array, not only did she lose contact with the great rainbow halo shell world, she also lost contact with her real body. How could she know what Shi was doing outside the devil array? However, she understood that Shi could have used the demonic formation to trap her long ago, but Shi had been playing hard to get, making her think that she could do it with ease. Thus, she was unprepared to absorb the seven-colored halos from the big seven-colored halos shell world. Moreover, she remembered clearly that just now, in order to kill Shi Yan in one strike, she had contacted her main body and obtained a huge amount of seven-colored halos from her main body. Moreover, she understood that her great rainbow halo shell world should be an invincible existence in the three continents, and the only fatal weakness of this invincibility was her weak real body. Since Xiaohua had already fought an intense battle with the five-colored sea god shellfish, he should know how to defeat Mo Wuji. Since Xiaohua was sucked into the shellfish world, the only way for him to escape without being killed was to find Mo Wuji's main body. Therefore, Bei Xian had already concealed her real body, and she was confident that Xiaohua would not be able to find any trace of her. Unfortunately, Bei Xian had underestimated Xiaohua, and even underestimated the methods of Deva, Shi, and Reverend Yun. After just a few rounds of fighting, Shi had already forced Bei Xian to reveal her real body. Kill. Thinking of this, Bei Xian's body emitted a dazzling light again, and the rainbow halo shell world pierced towards the devil array like a light sword. "Huh, you can't hold it anymore?" Shi laughed and said arrogantly. "That's right. You've been lonely for countless years, countless cold nights, unable to sleep. Now that you've met my real body, it's no wonder that you're eager to make a move." Roar! While speaking, the devil array surged with a sea of blood, rushing towards Bei Xian. Each of the devils opened their bloody mouths, and blood instantly stained the beautiful rainbow halo. Boom! Within the dazzling light, Bei Xian's doppelgangers exploded crazily, instantly destroying the devil array within several hundred miles. However, that was all. Whether it was the dazzling light or the terrifying aura, they rushed into the devil array again, and the blood sea had already drowned them. After a few breaths, the blood sea continued to rush into the inner layer, swallowing the remaining rainbow halo shell world. When all the light disappeared, the huge devil array surged again, and Shur's laughter rang out again. The taste of an old beggar is really not bad. I wonder how her tender little meat is like? Then, the devil array's outer layer flashed with lightning. Not only did it destroy the rainbow halo shell world, but it also surged into the depths of the space. Inside the rainbow halo shell world, there was a very dense devil chi. It had already rushed out of the tunnel of 100 miles, and it was entering the endless rainbow halo shell world. The celestial being Shur and Hui were showing off their power, so how could Xiaohua be weak? Facing Bei Xian'er's tidal wave of attacks, Xiaohua was not nervous at all. Instead, he opened his mouth, and a snow-white brilliance shot out from his mouth, rushing towards the rainbow halo shell world and the broken space. That snow-white brilliance was like a silk thread, and after flying for several zhang, it stopped in the air, and a snow-white ice worm king appeared from the brilliance. This ice worm king seemed to be confused, flapping its transparent wings in the air. After circling for a while, a cold aura gushed out from its body, and it rushed towards the rumbling sound. Boom, boom, boom. The broken space rushed towards the ice worm king, but on the surface of the ice worm king's body, sharp rays of light shot out, effortlessly blocking the power of space. Even the ice worm king's body, which was flapping its wings, was not stopped by this violent force. Behind the broken space was Bei Xian'er's mountain-like arm. Shua! The snow-white color on the ice worm king's body suddenly expanded, and the surrounding space was dyed red by this snow-white color. Kacha kacha! Waves of freezing sounds were heard. The broken space was instantly frozen, and the violent power of space also condensed into a vortex of fine lines within the ice. More than once, the snow-colored light touched Bei Xian'er's arm. Although the snow-colored light looked like fireflies, Bei Xian'er's arm clearly paused, as though it had encountered an impenetrable defense. A seven-colored light tide even more vast than the mountain range once again enveloped Bei Xian'er's arm. Unfortunately, no matter how fierce this rainbow halo shell world's light was, once it touched the snow-white brilliance, it immediately froze, and there was no accident at all. Moreover, this condensation was even more fierce than the rainbow halo shell world's light. It directly crashed into Bei Xian'er's arm, and directly rushed towards Bei Xian'er's illusory body. Damn it! What is this? Bei Xian'er turned pale with fright. She was from the Shell clan, and speaking of which, she was also from the Water clan. The Ice Worm King's body was extremely cold, and it was another kind of nemesis of the Water clan. The Ice Worm King had been sleeping in Xiaohua's space for tens of thousands of years, and especially after the separation of yin and yang, its potential was limitless. In an ordinary fight, Xiaohua didn't think of using the Ice Worm King, but now that he saw how powerful the Rainbow Halo Shell world was, he had already taken out the Ice Worm King from the space. The Ice Worm King really didn't disappoint Xiaohua. It really was Bei Xian'er's nemesis. Wherever the Ice Worm King passed, not only was the space frozen, even Bei Xian'er's illusory body was frozen. Damn it! Bei Xian'er naturally knew that Xiaohua wouldn't answer her question, because at this time, Xiaohua was holding his chin and looking at her with a meaningful gaze, as if he would only be satisfied if she was frozen into an ice sculpture. Therefore, Bei Xian'er angrily cursed. She opened her mouth, and a rainbow halo holy light pillar flew out, wanting to block the Ice Worm King in the space. According to Bei Xian'er's thinking, this holy light pillar didn't belong to the 5 elements, so it should be able to block the Ice Worm King. Unfortunately, she was ridiculously wrong. How could Xiaohua's space be ordinary? The holy light pillar was also frozen into an ice pillar by the Ice Worm King. Moreover, the ice pillar condensed at an extremely fast speed, and against the light, it spread towards Bei Xian'er's space. Chapter 4400. Not good. At this moment, Bei Xian'er suddenly realized that she was in danger. She did not dare to be careless. Her frozen arms suddenly broke from the middle. Her body flashed and she was about to escape. Unfortunately, her arm was not broken. The Ice Worm King moved and instantly crossed all the layers of ice to attack the part of her arm that was not frozen. The ice layer did not exist in the eyes of the Ice Worm King. Bei Xian coldly snorted. This cold snort actually trembled because as the Ice Worm King approached, Bei Xian already felt that the space around her was filled with unbearable coldness. This was a situation she had never encountered in her life. Boom! Bei Xian was also a decisive person. Seeing this, her entire body immediately turned into fragments of light. She ignored the parts of her body that were already frozen and rushed in all directions. However, when Bei Xian flew, she sadly discovered that even the 7-colored threads of light were much slower in this extremely cold space. Compared to her previous teleportation, her flying speed was comparable to that of a snail's. Damn it, damn it, damn it! Bei Xian cursed 3 times in a row. She watched as the light around her slowly drifted and then slowly solidified. A kind of coldness began to permeate from the surface of her body into her heart. This permeation was also strange. Bei Xian felt that this coldness also carried Xiaohua's smile as it invaded her body bit by bit. This made her feel ashamed and unable to show her face. Did I do something wrong? Bei Xian suddenly felt a sense of regret. However, in just a moment, another kind of fear rose from the bottom of her heart. This was a kind of warning, a kind of alertness that the main body was being approached by someone. Not good. I can't let Xiaohua get close to the main body. Bei Xian's heart was filled with despair. Wang. The 7-colored light around Bei Xian began to forcefully revolve, and within the 7-colored light, there was an additional layer of blood-red light. Boom, boom, boom. The light formed a huge vortex, and from the void, countless 7-colored light fell down. The entire light suddenly exploded violently outside the ice layer. The Ice Worm King naturally also sensed the danger, but it only teleported a few miles and then flapped its wings and rushed into the ice layer. The dense milky white color instantly enveloped the 7-colored light. Layers of ice threads began to condense at the edge of the light layer that was about to explode. Little ice. Xiaohua did not know how to address the Ice Worm King. He casually said, "Back off." The Ice Worm King instantly understood Xiaohua's meaning, but it did not retreat even half an inch. This little guy is quite strong. Xiaohua faintly smiled and waved his hand. Rumble. An enormous palm-sized thunderbolt appeared out of thin air. This thunderbolt was divided into 4 layers, and each thunderbolt was formed by 4 threads of lightning. These 4 threads of lightning were the Yin lightning of 3 corpses, the true lightning of 5 qi, the 9 heavens divine lightning, and the nether devil lightning. 4 lightning threads at the same time, perhaps only Xiaohua's main body could use them. When this lightning hand appeared, the lightning actually gave birth to the power of life and death. This power of life and death was extremely weak, but the Tao of life and death was still the head of the 3,000 grand Taos. When Xiaohua first set foot on the Tao of immortality, because of his benevolence, his heart was touched by the sight of life and death. From there, he glimpsed the outline of the Tao of life and death. Later on, as his cultivation deepened, his understanding of the Tao of life and death became more and more profound. However, the Tao of life and death was one of the 3,000 grand Taos and the head of the grand Taos. Not to mention the cultivators of the mortal world, even the immortals of the immortal world would not be able to use the Tao of life and death in their spells. Xiaohua was blessed by the heavens and cultivated the art of lightning. What was special about him was that he had the Thunderbolt Immortal, Wenxiu, Shi, and Wu clones. These 4 clones cultivated the art of lightning of Taoism, Confucianism, Devil, and Soul cultivators respectively. Thunder had always been the will of the world and represented life and death. Because of this, Xiaohua was able to vaguely see life and death under the power of the 4 types of lightning. What was more special was that Xiaohua had the inside of space and could control the origin power of the netherworld. All of these fortuitous encounters allowed him to faintly mix a trace of the power of life and death into his lightning arts. In other words, This trace of the power of life and death was a high and mighty divine ability in the mortal world. Unfortunately, Xiaohua's Tao of life and death was too weak and could not guarantee success in a fight. As long as the opponent could dodge before the Tao of life and death fell, this near-invincible divine ability would be ineffective. At this moment, Bei Xian was frozen in space by the Ice Worm King. Although she wanted to self-detonate and use the power of self-detonation to escape danger, her body was unable to move. Seeing Xiaohua's hand of thunder coming down, the Tao of life and death had already relied on the power of thousands of lightning to land on Bei Xian's illusory body. It was even more powerful than the Ice Worm King's ice seal. When the lightning fell, the Tao of life and death instantly penetrated through the layers of indestructible ice and solidified the huge whirlpool of light. Each of the whirlpools was like a dazzling ice flower with 7 colored threads of light that were abnormally clear. Not only that, but when the Tao of life and death passed through the light and landed on Bei Xian's illusory body, it was like rain pouring down. The 7-colored light faded at a visible rate and turned into black and white in just a moment. Ah? Bei Xian was shocked and her heart was filled with thousands of doubts. What divine ability is this? Just as Bei Xian's doubts arose, the black and white spread to her illusory body again. Not only was the 7-colored brilliance erased, but the thousands of vitality were also annihilated in an instant. It was like a blooming peach flower withering under the power of heaven and earth. The black and white within 1,000 miles slowly turned back into the energy of heaven and earth and disappeared without a trace before the ice seal spread again. Seeing Bei Xian's illusory body and 7-colored halo being destroyed by the hand of thunder, even Xiaohua himself was shocked. However, at this moment, a huge rumbling sound came from the depths of space. Demon Sovereign Shi's angry roar and Bei Xian's battle cry could be faintly heard. Xiaohua did not have time to think too much. He waved his hand and said with a smile, "Little ice, come back." Wang. The Ice Worm King ignored the layer of ice and instantly landed in front of Xiaohua. It flapped its wings and circled around Xiaohua a few times as if it was asking for credit. Not bad, not bad. Xiaohua smiled. He opened his mouth and shot out a beam of light, which landed on the Ice Worm King's body. The light dimmed, and the Ice Worm King was sucked into his body. After that, Xiaohua glanced around. The 7-colored halo around him had become very sparse. Presumably, Bei Xian had been attracted by Demon Sovereign Shi and was too busy to notice this place. Hee. The corners of Xiaohua's mouth curved upward as he sneered in his mind. He knew his plan had worked. As long as he could kill as many of Bei Xian's illusory bodies as possible, he would be able to force her true body out, or destroy this 7-colored halo shell world. With a sway of his body, Xiaohua flew towards the source of the sound. Although he had not teleported yet, his flying speed was already much faster than before. However, before Xiaohua could fly 1,000 miles away, he sensed something again and turned to look. He saw that Reverend Yun had revealed his dragon body, with rosy clouds gushing out from under his body. He too was flying towards the depths of the void. "How's the situation, fellow Daoist?" Xiaohua asked with a smile on his face. "I have killed more than half of Bei Xian's illusory bodies, but when I was about to unleash my attack, she suddenly vanished. After that, I heard the sound of fighting between Bei Xian and that devil spirit boy. I guess he must have found her true body." Bei Xian dared not to be distracted, so she kept her incarnation. Reverend Yun answered coolly. "Fellow Daoist, why can't you wield the Pangu axe?" Xiaohua asked again. Reverend Yun nodded regretfully and answered, "Yes. The Pangu axe is a divine item, and even with Ai's ability, I still can't wield it freely. I'm sorry to disappoint you, fellow Daoist." "Ha, it's not really a disappointment." Xiaohua waved his hand smilingly. "If fellow Daoist can wield the Pangu axe now, it would no longer be the Pangu axe. Besides, if we could wield it freely, wouldn't we be invincible in the world?" "Ha, that's true." Reverend Yun laughed and said, "Wouldn't that be boring? Fellow Daoist, please wait for me." Even as he spoke, The celestial moved his body and chased after Xiaohua. Xiaohua asked a few questions, and found that the situation of the celestial was similar to that of Reverend Yun. The celestial complained, "Fellow Daoist, you have to find me a suitable magical item. I can easily deal with ordinary cultivators with my bare hands, but for an expert like Bei Xian, I can't easily deal with her without a magical item. Besides, although the bones of the celestial are useful, I can't always use them. After all, they don't belong to I, and I can't refine them." "Don't worry, fellow Daoist." Xiaohua replied helplessly, "Fellow Daoist, please refine the two essences first. Perhaps you'll have some luck in the future." "All right." The celestial did not want to push Xiaohua too much. Following him, Xiaohua and Reverend Yun formed a triangle and flew into the depths of the space. After flying for several tens of thousands of miles, Xiaohua saw that the space in front of them was filled with countless colorful light patterns that looked like layers of rainbow bridges, covering the entire heaven and earth. Narrowing his eyes, he pointed his finger at them and said, "Fellow Daoists, please take a look." Previously, as far as our eyes could see, this space was nearly boundless, and even our divine will could not reach far. But now, after we've killed a few of Bei Xian'er's shadows, the light in this space has weakened, and Bei Xian'er's ability to control the spatial barrier has been greatly reduced. If I'm not mistaken, these rainbow bridges are the shells of Bei Xian'er's true form, and the light in the spatial barrier originated from them. If fellow Daoist Yun's Panga axe can be used, we can break the wall and get out of here. That's right. Reverend Yun nodded and said, "I can smell a strong primitive aura from these light bridges. Even without the Panga axe, we can still fight our way out." The celestial yelled and increased his flying speed. Chapter 44:01. There was no need for Xiaohua and the others to search carefully, as the billowing fiend energy and bloodstains had already enveloped an area of several hundred miles under the Bridge of Light. All the fiends in the fiend energy were roaring crazily, shooting out beams of colorful light that looked like flying swords from time to time. When the fiend energy was killed, the light beams were tainted by the fiend blood. Wave after wave, it looked like the cycle of reincarnation. Boom! Just as Xiaohua was about to rush forward to help, a huge rumbling sound came from where the Bridge of Light was, and then a ball of scarlet fire that was like a scorching sun flew out from the Bridge of Light. Wherever the fireball passed, the space collapsed, and an incomparably ferocious aura was unleashed from it, rushing toward the fiend energy. Pa 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 pa. Wherever the flames passed, light and shadow flashed past. The billowing devil chi was extinguished by the fireballs, and the torrential devil blood was also burned dry. Hordes of devils wailed and fled toward Xiaohua and the others. Even Lord Shi revealed himself in the fiend energy in a somewhat sorry state. Demon Lord Shi's body expanded like a demon god. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched the fireball. Boom! The fireball's flames were extinguished, and Demon Lord Shi's demon fist was smashed into pieces. However, the fireball spun and actually managed to reduce the majority of Demon Sovereign Shi's strength. Furthermore, the force of the collision did not decrease in the slightest, and it continued to smash towards Demon Sovereign Shi. Good heavens! Lord Shi yelled as he fled toward where Xiaohua and the others came from, and the billowing fiend energy was retracted as well. Bei Xian'er, are you trying to kill your husband? Don't worry, fiend spirit. We're here to help you. The Devis had been preparing for a long time. When they saw Lord Shi was defeated, they gave a loud roar and opened their mouths, shooting out 3 beams of light toward the fireball. Hee hee. Reverend Yun smiled. A ripple came out from his dragon horn, sealing the space behind Lord Shi. Layers of golden dragon symbols emerged from the space. Boom! The light pillars and dragon patterns blocked the sphere, creating a deafening sound. The space within hundreds of miles was destroyed by the sphere, collapsing. Countless dragon patterns and light pillars were destroyed by this strange sphere. After looking at the round ball again, an enormous 7-colored light pillar that could almost split the heavens and the earth was revealed. This light pillar trembled slightly, and the surrounding space trembled and distorted. A kind of godlike majesty came from this light pillar, enveloping the space within 1,000 miles. Damn it, this thing is really powerful. Reverend Yun was shocked when he saw the dragon marks being killed by the absolute power. What kind of magical treasure is this? Seeing that the light beam was ineffective, the celestial being's 6 arms immediately reached into the void, wanting to block the sphere. Unfortunately, this place was already close to Bei Xian'er's body, and the space was sealed by her. How could the celestial being enter the void? Roar! The celestial felt quite embarrassed and roared, "I'll help you." Then, the celestial being flew up and charged toward Lord Shi. His 6 arms turned into hundreds of white bones and smashed toward the sphere. Boom! 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 The sphere was stopped by the celestial being's attack, but the celestial being was knocked back 100 miles. Puff! Seeing an opportunity, Xiaohua released the Ice Worm King again without hesitation. Layers of ice instantly froze the sphere, and Xiaohua waved his hand again, unleashing a thunderous hand mixed with the power of life and death. At this moment, Bei Xian'er's cold voice was heard coming from the towering light pillar. "I've suffered a loss once. How can I not learn from my mistakes?" As he spoke, the sphere spun once again, and a crack appeared in the frozen space nearby. Countless dense rainbow-colored rays of light gushed out from the crack, and the sphere suddenly disappeared before Xiaohua's thunderous hand could land on it. The sphere disappeared, and the thunderous hand naturally missed. However, after Xiaohua withdrew his hand, he waved his hand, and a powder fell in front of him. Xiaohua looked at it, and his face became solemn. He transmitted his voice, "Fellow Daoists, this is Bei Xian'er's life pearl produced in the 7-colored halo shell world. Not only is it extremely heavy, it's also incomparably sturdy. I'm afraid Bei Xian'er has to rely on this life pearl to make up for her fatal weakness of softness." That's right. Lord Shi came over, and his face was still in shock. He said, "Bei Xian'er's life pearl is very powerful. Not only can the 7-colored brilliance destroy all things of the 5 elements, the holy aura hidden inside is also the nemesis of my demon race. Also, this object seems to be extremely heavy, and the space is unable to bear it. Previously, I followed the aura of Bei Xian'er's bloodline to this place. I thought I could achieve something before Big Brother, but I didn't expect that this object would appear out of nowhere and almost injure me. Although this object is powerful, it can't reach far." Reverend Yun narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance, where the natal pearl was wheeling like a star near the huge light pillar. "If we don't get close to Bei Xian'er's true form, she can't do anything to us," said Reverend Yun. "The problem is," the heaven being shouted, "if we don't kill Bei Xian, how are we going to break this life pearl's shell? That pearl is already so powerful, it seems like we can only use the Pangu axe to break her shell." "Of course, we can wait here with Bei Xian," Xiaohua said with a gloomy face, "but Feng Wu, Daoist Wu, and once you can't wait, and neither can the 200,000 disciples of my fortune gate. It looks like we can only take a risk." "Take a risk, take a risk. Kill this monster," the heaven being shouted. "Human." Bei Xian'er's cold voice rang out again, "I admire you and I admire your helpers. All of you are very powerful. But, even if you can wait until you get here and find my true body, you are still no match for me. If you surrender obediently, I will only kill all of you. I won't make things difficult for those humans outside, and I won't kill the 200,000 disciples you brought here. Otherwise, not only will I kill all of you, I will also kill the 200,000 humans. I will even order the 6 great saints of the Great Sage Palace to lead the demon army to invade the hidden immortal continent and kill all the human cultivators. You are indeed a big-breasted but brainless woman." Xiaohua said coldly, "You are forcing me to kill you." "Hee, at this point what else can you do?" Bei Xian'er burst out laughing. "Don't think that your thunder technique is very powerful and that you can kill my incorporeal body. That little worm of yours is just a little worm in front of me." Boom, boom, boom. The previously frozen space of King Ice Worm collapsed under the raging 7-colored light tide. Even though some of the spaces were not unsealed, they were still shattered by the light tide. Seeing the light tide coming at him from all directions, the prime pearl that looked like a star also moved. A suffocating force came rushing over, completely suppressing Xiaohua. Facing such an attack, Xiaohua did not panic. He waved his hand and said, "Fellow Daoists, let's do it." In an instant, Reverend Yun, the heaven being, and the exalted fiend all understood Xiaohua's intention, and they all burst out laughing. Reverend Yun moved his body and recited the heavenly dragon spell, causing the energy waves on his dragon horns to soar into the sky and meet the light tide. Meanwhile, the exalted fiend formation roared and activated it, sending billowing fiend energy toward the light tide like a tide. Seeing the three doppelgangers move, Xiaohua smiled coldly and raised his hand to slap the top of his head. Boom! Within the soaring multicolored light, the 108th tribulation's scattered nascent souls flew out according to the formation they had arranged in advance in his lower dantian. As soon as they landed in the air, they immediately set up a simple golden crow immortal slaying demon formation. Bei Xian immediately noticed the formation. She cried out in surprise, "How can you use your Kunlun mirror?" Xiaohua smiled coldly and did not answer Bei Xian's question. Instead, he ordered, "Fellow Daoists, kill this demon." 108 nascent soul cultivators answered in unison, then performed an incantation gesture. Gradually, the entire demon formation flashed brightly and transformed into a huge gold crow. Xiaohua already had a plan when he first came out of Bei Xian's big seven-colored halo shell world. He knew that inside this barrier, all spatial artifacts couldn't be used. Moreover, his lower dantian was a part of Xiaohua's body and didn't belong to space. Therefore, the group of 8th-rank scattered nascent souls inside his lower dantian could come out. Therefore, when Xiaohua flew out of the dimension and asked the heaven being to enter, he also kept 36 nascent soul cultivators in his lower dantian, so that they could be of help at a critical moment. Even the Ice Worm King had to be sent into Xiaohua's dantian from within the space. Damn it! Bei Xian cursed under her breath when she saw the formation was taking shape, leaving her no time to react. The towering beam of light emitted a dazzling light, illuminating the space within several hundred miles as if it was daytime. Suddenly, a stream of light that looked like a mirror appeared in front of the light tide that was lunging towards the heaven being, Reverend Yun, and Lord Fiend. The light tide fell into the stream of light and disappeared. As for the prime pearl, it had also vanished after shattering the space within 100 miles. The heaven being, Reverend Yun, and Lord Fiend were slightly taken aback, and they halted in midair. However, right after they stopped moving, the space within 10,000 miles in front of them had undergone a drastic change, as if it was going to destroy the heaven and earth. Not to mention the fact that the space within a radius of 10,000 miles was distorted and the light and shadows were torn apart, not to mention the fact that the rainbow tide was spinning madly within the space, creating huge whirlpools that were annihilated without any pattern. Not to mention that the natal pearl was also trembling, and the light and shadows on its surface were creating layers of illusions. Above the dimension, the thick beam of light in the colorful heaven and earth was expanding rapidly. It flew out from the heaven and earth like a giant python, whizzing and spinning wildly outside the dimension. As the beam of light spun, the seven-colored light tide poured out from the heaven and earth like the Milky Way, falling into the dimension that had undergone a drastic change. The unusual change in the Great Rainbow Shell realm had attracted the attention of all the people in the sacred realm of Thousand Demons. Even Golden-Winged Great Rock and the other great saints of the demon race were struck dumb when they saw what was happening. Chapter 4402. 7-star Great Saint Feng Wu was originally chatting with Daoist Wu, Wen Chu, and the other great saints of the demon race. Suddenly, the ground shook a few hundred miles away from them. The night in the sky began to settle, and layers of darkness fell like rain and frost. Following which, a vast aura rushed out from the ground, shooting straight into the night sky. When the aura covered thousands of miles, a huge shell was revealed from the ground. The terrifying aura was emitted from this shell. Looking at the surroundings of the shell, 7-colored light wrapped around it like ribbons of light. Wherever the ribbons of light swept past, the ground shattered, and space was torn apart. Pieces of land were merged into the ribbons of light. High in the sky, the night was also torn apart, and space was shattered. The stars and moons in the sky were hidden in the morning sun, but now they were revealed again. They were abnormally bright, as if the aura of the entire world was disturbed. The power of the stars and moons was sucked in. The ribbons of light expanded, and so did the shell. Finally, it was tens of thousands of miles wide, and the aura covered hundreds of thousands of miles. The 7 colors of the shell lit up the entire night sky. Although the sun had already shot out from the east, the sun couldn't cover the 7-colored light. Bei Xian, Er's true body was revealed like this. Feng Wu, Wen Chu, the 5-colored sea god shell, and the flying feather void beast couldn't get close. Not only were they forced back tens of thousands of miles by the terrifying aura and dazzling 7-colored light, they also had to use their powers to block the penetration of the 7-colored light and the powerful suction of the shell. The 5-colored seashell couldn't help but exclaim, "Ancestor?" Translator, Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios. The 5-colored seashell couldn't help but exclaim, "Ancestor?" Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, several 7-colored halos flashed past his head. The 5-colored sea god seashell's body immediately left its body and shot toward the halos. The sea god seashell's body also couldn't help but rush toward the 7-colored shell in the distance. The 5-colored sea god shell was shocked. He hurriedly moved and disappeared in space. When he reappeared, he was hiding far behind the great saint Golden-Winged Rock and the other great saints of the demon race. Looking at the place where the 5-colored sea god shell was previously, Bai Qingyu's monster corpses were pulled into the sky by the 7-colored halos. These corpses were torn apart in the halos, and the various colors of the corpses were absorbed by the halos of the 7-colored sea god shell. The 7-colored sea god shell. In addition to the monster corpses in the sky, giant trees, rocks were also torn apart or sucked into the halos of the 7-colored sea god shell. Hiss! The golden-winged great prung sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes flashed with golden light. He had never seen Bei Xian use such a big divine ability. He also didn't think that Xiao Hua, who was sucked into the big 7-colored halo shell world, could cause Bei Xian to use such power. Saint Golden-Winged Rock's shell became more and more now. He became more and Yu was. Tiger Wu and the battle. Before seeing the result of the battle, he wouldn't stretch out a single feather or use any kind of divine ability. With the great rock thinking this, the cunning flying feather void beast naturally watched from the sidelines. He even moved closer to Feng Wu. He knew that even if Xiaohua was killed by the great ancestor, Feng Wu was still a 7-star great saint of the Great Sage Hall. Since Xiaohua had such a powerful divine ability, Feng Wu must be on the same level. Of course, if the great ancestor was killed by Xiaohua, the flying feather void beast didn't even dare to think about what would happen. Would the Great Sage Hall still be the Great Sage Hall of the demon race? Old ancestor. Only the 5-colored sea god seashell's heart was in his throat. He wanted to use his origin force to investigate, but his origin force was immediately shattered the moment it came into contact with the light beam. He could only wait silently in the distance. Fellow Immortal, do you feel anything? Wen Chu frowned and asked Daoist Wu, how is fellow Daoist Xiao? Same as before, I don't feel anything. Daoist sorcerer also had a worried look on his face as he transmitted his voice. This big shell is too strange. It seems to be a world of its own. Daoist Xiao immediately lost contact with us when he fell in. Even my soul cultivation secret technique can't contact him. Rumble. Just as Daoist sorcerer's voice was transmitted, there was a deafening roar from the shell. Then, there was a crisp cracking sound and some cracks appeared on the shell. Quickly, fellow Daoist Xiao is about to break free. Let's go over quickly. Feng Wu's phoenix eyes were the sharpest, and he immediately cried out when he saw the cracks appear. However, before they could move, an unexpected event occurred once more. Xiaohua released the 108 level 8 scattered nascent souls from his lower dantian. The golden crow immortal slaying demonic array was formed in a few breaths. Bei Xian was shocked and didn't dare to hide anything. She hurriedly activated all her demonic power and used all her divine abilities. Not only did the image of chaos appear in the seven-colored light shell realm, but she also absorbed a terrifying amount of yuan qi of heaven and earth and the power of the stars and moon to replenish her energy. However, Xiaohua was fully prepared. The number of scattered nascent souls that came out was beyond Bei Xian's expectation. Before Bei Xian was ready, the golden crow immortal slaying demonic array was activated. This was 108 8th tribulation scattered nascent soul cultivators. If they attacked at the same time, no one in the Thousand Devil Sacred Realm would be a match for them, let alone when they formed a formation. The huge golden crow flashed with lightning. Not only did the lightning condense into the golden crow's body, but it also turned into flames that spread into the space. Before the golden crow rushed into the chaotic space and landed on the whirlpool formed by the seven-colored light shell, its destructive aura had already caused the entire space to become chaotic. When the golden crow rushed into the space, the distorted space was instantly pierced through. The countless seven-colored light shell and the seven-colored light shell were annihilated at the same time. The golden crow screeched and pounced on the pearl of life that was filled with illusions. Boom! With a loud sound, the previously indestructible pearl of life was smashed into pieces. The seven-colored powder turned into dust and rose into the sky. After the pearl of life, it was naturally Bei Xian's real body. Under the golden crow's aura, the light pillar that supported the sky was extinguished. Xiaohua could even see Bei Xian's soft pink body. However, at this moment, countless thick python-like light strips fell from the space outside and entangled the golden crow like a huge light net. Boom! There was no particular suspense. The golden crow rushed into the light net, and the thick light net could not stop it. In a moment, it was smashed into pieces by the impact. However, to Xiaohua's surprise, Bei Xian's real body had disappeared behind the light net, and what was coming toward him was the seven-colored light shell. Boom! The golden crow pounced on the seven-colored light shell and produced a loud rumble. Amidst the rumble, the seven-colored light shell began to crack. Dozens of seven-colored light shards, each measuring several acres in size, fell down from the cracks. Bei Xian's painful cry came from behind those broken light strips not far away. Then, before Xiaohua could order the 8 tribulation nascent soul to attack again, Bei Xian's hysterical voice came from the sky. "Human, if that's the case, I'll die together with you." While she was speaking, dozens of seven-colored tentacles reached out from the turbulence of space and grabbed those seven-colored light shards. Then, amidst a loud noise, they attacked Xiaohua, Celestial Being, Reverend Yun, Archfiend Shi, and the 8 tribulation nascent soul. The seven-colored light shards were very strange. After whimpering, they immediately disappeared from the space. In just a few breaths of time, the space in front of Xiaohua glowed with a sharp light, from which a cold aura that could cut one's soul rushed out. Without hesitation, Xiaohua teleported backward. At the same time, he waved his hand, and the 4-colored thunderbolt hand came crashing down. As soon as Xiaohua moved, a 7-colored light shard rushed out, and the 4-colored thunderbolt hand came crashing down. But it was a pity that the 7-colored light shard went straight up. With a light swoosh, the thunderbolt hand was cut apart by it, and then it cut through the space and came crashing down on Xiaohua. The 7-colored light shard seemed to be one with the space, and there was no hindrance in the space. Xiaohua had just realized that the 7-colored light shard had already hit him. Swoosh! With a light swoosh, Xiaohua's transcendence golden body was immediately shattered, and his fleshly body was cut open. The cut was several miles long and several feet deep. The wound on the 7-colored light shard was very strange. Not only was it painful to the bone marrow, but it was also like an iron hammer had hit his soul. It was so painful that Xiaohua could not help but cry out, and his transcendence golden body shrunk rapidly. Without waiting for Xiaohua to perform any other divine ability, the seven-colored light shard once again came crashing down on his neck. Xiaohua was scared out of his wits. Once again, the thunderbolts around him were activated, and he fled into the distance. Oh! Right at this moment, Reverend Yun's miserable howl was heard. A few of his huge dragon scales had been shattered by the seven-colored light shard, and dragon blood was flowing out from under the scales. Reverend Yun was already in such a state, but Celestial and Archfiend sure were not any better. The surface of Celestial's body was covered with cuts, while Archfiend Sure's fiend body was chopped into a few pieces. The 108th Tribulation's scattered nascent souls were also driven away by the seven-colored light shard. In particular, a few of them were nearly chopped in half by the seven-colored light shard. At this moment, Bei Xian was like a crazy woman who had completely lost her mind. No one dared to provoke her. No! Xiaohua had tried to dodge a few times, but he still could not escape from Bei Xian's vicious attack, and his body was covered with wounds. Then he looked at Archfiend Sure, Celestial, Reverend Yun, and those 8th Tribulation's scattered nascent souls. They were also covered with wounds, and it was hard for them to protect themselves. Xiaohua became more and more anxious, and he thought to himself, this seven-colored light shard must be a part of Bei Xian's shell, and I wonder how many years she has been refining it. This thing is also an invincible magical treasure in her seven-colored light shell realm. If we are forced to retreat by her again, not only will we not be able to protect ourselves, even those over 100 scattered nascent souls will be killed by her one by one, even though they have the overall strength of 9th-tier nascent souls. When that happens, all my previous efforts will be in vain. Chapter 4403. Thinking of this, Xiaohua clenched his teeth and opened his mouth again. Pooh! A ray of light rushed out and an object appeared in the air. This object was none other than Shang Huaming's god statue. Xiaohua had previously sent it into his dantian from the space in case of an emergency. He really didn't expect that. At this time, Xiaohua would finally have an opportunity to use this object. It was very strange. The moment the statue landed in the air, it immediately gave off an indescribable aura. Although the statue was the same as before, it didn't have any splendor and looked very inconspicuous in the seven-colored space, but Yi Shiwen didn't know what to say. However, as soon as that indescribable aura was released, all the seven-colored halos in the space suddenly became still. Even the rainbow-colored shards stopped in midair. In an instant, the entire space boiled, and all the halos surged toward the god statue. Ah! Bei Xian's surprised voice rang out once more. It was like a thunderclap that reverberated through the air. This voice was filled with disbelief and astonishment, but it was also filled with calmness and reverence. It was far from the crazed tone from before. Boom, boom, boom. The originally turbid halos in the space became transparent again. Bei Xian's huge body trembled as she slowly crawled down. A kind of solemnity, a kind of sacredness, a kind of sacrificial aura spontaneously emerged in the space. See God, this servant is guilty, this servant is guilty. A kind of almost hysterical voice sounded from where she was crawling. Bei Xian unexpectedly gave up on chasing Xiaohua and the others and threw herself in front of the god statue like a lowly servant. Looking at the god statue radiating 9 layers of brilliance that were even brighter than the sun, and the sacredness of the aura became even denser, Xiaohua let out a long sigh of relief. Bei Xian had previously said clearly that she had 2 goals in bringing Xiaohua into the seven-colored shell world. One was to kill Xiaohua and silence him. The other was to obtain the whereabouts of the god statue. However, Xiaohua also saw clearly that when he asked Bei Xian to confirm his identity, Bei Xian had once used light and shadow to create the image of the sea god. In front of that image, Bei Xian was so respectful and fearful. Therefore, Xiaohua believed that Bei Xian wanted to obtain the god statue of the sea god. However, he didn't believe that this god statue was as important as she said. Moreover, Xiaohua later tested Bei Xian several times. Bei Xian was rather fearful. All kinds of signs indicated that this god statue of the sea god was the only thing in the world that could restrain Bei Xian. Therefore, Bei Xian wanted to obtain it and not let others have it. Of course, Xiaohua couldn't be sure that his judgment was right. He was afraid that this was Bei Xian's trick to lure him into taking out the god statue. At this time, it seemed that he was already at the end of the road. Xiaohua had no choice but to take out the god statue. Seeing Bei Xian so fearful of the god statue, Xiaohua's heart was greatly relieved. He knew that he had made the right bet. There was a glimmer of hope in the dark. Because he was afraid that Bei Xian would take the god statue away, Xiaohua didn't release the god statue too far away. He still kept it in his domain. At this time, the seven-colored tide of light ignored Xiaohua's domain and directly rushed into the god statue. Xiaohua looked at Bei Xian lying on the ground and coldly said, Bei Xian, since you have seen the god statue, you should stop, right? Quickly open the barrier, otherwise this Xiao will kill you. Bei Xian's body trembled. She looked extremely fearful and didn't dare to say a word. Demon Sovereign Shi's scattered body slowly condensed at this time. The demon flame on the surface of his body dimmed a lot. He smiled and flew to Xiaohua's side. Looking at the god statue of the sea god, he shouted, Big brother, you are really powerful. This unremarkable thing is actually the biggest nemesis of this old beggar. Ha ha ha. Before Xiaohua could speak, Bei Xian's wild laughter came from the light pillar again. Human, you are really shallow. I was just putting on a show and you fell for it. You think I am really afraid of this god statue? Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. He waved his right hand and used the universe in the sleeve technique. He wanted to collect the god statue. However, the god statue that fell into the seven-colored tide of light was incomparably heavy. It seemed to have merged with the entire space. Even with Xiaohua's ability, he couldn't collect it. Damn it. I was tricked. Xiaohua's face was pale as he cursed in a low voice. At this time, he understood that if this god statue was as important as he thought, how could Bei Ming casually leave it in Shang Huaming's ancestral hall? Why didn't he carry it with him? He was still tricked by Bei Xian. He foolishly took the initiative to deliver this god statue to her. Haha. Bei Xian saw that Xiaohua failed to collect the god statue and slowly stood up. The pillar of light that supported the sky appeared again. Following Bei Xian's laughter, the incomparably heavy god statue slowly flew towards her. As it approached, the divine aura on the god statue became denser and denser. This god statue of the sea god is a sacred artifact used by the descendants of my sea clan to display the might of the sea god. Bei Xian's mood was extremely good. She smiled and said, with this object, I can borrow the power of the sea god's bloodline and exterminate everything. Back in the Red Sea domain, Bei Ming used this object to exterminate 100,000 members of the sea clan. Since I can't use my spirit formation power to kill you all today, I will use this sacred artifact and let you all have a taste of my Shell clan's absolute saint's attack. Human, all of this is what you call fate. You took out my clan's sacred artifact to invite me to take your life. Let's go. When Xiaohua saw that the aura on the god statue was gradually turning corporeal, he dared not to hesitate any longer. Devis, Reverend Yun, Archfiend Shi, and the 108th Tribulation's scattered nascent soul cultivators followed Xiaohua and sped away into the distance. They were not sure if they could escape from this great seven-colored shell realm. Bei Xian was not in a hurry to chase after them. She laughed and said, in front of the sea god, all of you are just ants. Not to mention in my great seven-colored shell realm, even in the sacred realm of 1,000 demons, all of you can never escape from the might of the sea god. As Bei Xian spoke, she saw the sea god statue getting closer and closer. A blood-red light shot out from the pillar of light and landed on the sea god statue. Boom! The sea god statue suddenly emitted a blood-red brilliance and fell towards Bei Xian's body. When the statue touched Bei Xian's true form, a sacred and majestic aura that could make all living things prostrate rolled out from the statue, and the entire space was filled with a buzzing noise. After that, The glow on Bei Xian's true form vanished in an instant. The statue swayed its tail as if it was alive, and the upper body of the human figure was surging violently. Human. Bei Xian, who had activated the sacred item with the blood essence of the descendants of the sea god, said in an extremely majestic voice from the statue, "Since you have offended the dignity of the sea god, I'll let you die under the majesty of the sea god today. I'll let you know the wrath of the sea god, which should not exist in the mortal world." While speaking, Bei Xian, who had transformed into the sea god, waved her hands in the air. The entire space folded and rolled together, revealing the figures of Xiaohua and the others who were fleeing desperately. Then, a shadow emerged between Bei Xian's brows. It was the shape of the sea god, and it drifted down with the aura of a supreme god. The 108th tribulation nascent souls simply could not resist the majesty of the sea god. They were all pressed down and shrunk to the size of 3 feet, either curling up or crawling on the ground. They had no strength to resist at all. At this moment, sure, the fiend no longer looked like a fiend lord, and he could no longer take the form of a human. Like the fiend formation, he had been pressed down into a fiend energy, drifting powerlessly in the air. On the contrary, although the celestial, Reverend Yun and Xiaohua were suppressed by the sacred aura, they still straightened their necks and waists, stubbornly resisting it, although their resistance was weak and pale. "Die." Bei Xian's voice was like that of a god. "Use your blood and soul to offer to the sea god. Use your blood to redeem your sins." Swoosh. The shadow of the sea god turned into layers and fell towards Xiaohua and the others. The seemingly light yet heavy aura of the sea god fell between Xiaohua's brows, and a feeling of extinction emerged in his heart. The gains he had made in the heavenly prison for tens of thousands of years, the gains his clones had made in the bloody storm in the ruins, the gains he had made from the sages of Wenchu, the gains he had made from the stars of Phoenix Parasol, the gains he had made from the primordial purple chi, and so on, were all gone at the same time. Although it was just a moment, it was another 100,000 years in Xiaohua's Dao state. When Xiaohua's eyes moved again, a feeling of enlightenment emerged from the bottom of his heart. There is a great terror between life and death. What I said is true. My countless accumulations have actually gone through in this moment of life and death. My Dao state has actually reached the late stage of Mahayana realm. In the future, as long as I have enough time to accumulate, I will definitely be able to reach the highest realm. Sigh, what a pity! Because along with his enlightenment, Xiaohua felt that the aura that was like the will of heaven and earth had passed through the space between his brows and rushed into his Naiwen palace and the mysterious dark clouds. Everything would turn into nothingness in the blink of an eye. At this moment, Xiaohua's heart suddenly moved again. He thought of the mysterious golden core that he had picked up in the spatial crack of the Dragon Island. That golden core contained an extremely great mystery, and Xiaohua did not dare to consume it back then. Furthermore, when Xiaohua's space was evolving, this golden core had already left Shenhua continent and arrived at another place that had yet to take shape. Xiaohua understood even more clearly that this golden core was definitely not the golden core of the cultivation world. Today, not only had Xiaohua reached the Dao state, his cultivation had also reached a certain height. Although Xiaohua still felt that he did not dare to try the medicinal pill, at this moment, there was no way out. Xiaohua was the same as Bei Xian previously. He was prepared to fight to the death with his opponent. Presumably, if that mysterious golden core was consumed, when Xiaohua exploded, he would also be able to drag Bei Xian down with him. Chapter 4404. However, no matter where Xiaohua's consciousness went, there was still no news from Shenhua continent. Not to mention taking out the Jindan, he couldn't even take a look at it. However, just as Xiaohua was about to die, there was a sudden change. Outside Xiaohua's Naiwen palace, where the Buddha's Bodhi-Buddha heart fire was, a transparent golden crystal that was even smaller than an ant appeared. It was the tiny godhead that Xiaohua and his clone had condensed back on the primitive continent. The godhood that looked like a crystal was almost inaudible, but when the shadow of the sea god floated down, and the aura that resembled the will of heaven and earth landed, the entire crystal shone with an indescribable brilliance. This brilliance was different from ordinary brilliance. It didn't come from the crystal but from various parts of the void. It was as if golden threads of light were suspended above the crystal. These threads of light were densely packed, and when the other end landed in the void, they disappeared without a trace. The crystal had many crystal faces, and there were even more that hadn't been revealed. These threads of light landed on different crystal faces. Some crystal faces had more threads of light, while others had fewer threads of light. At the same time, strange scenes appeared where the light threads touched the crystal surface. Patches of faith power faintly covered the crystal surface like clouds. Within the clouds of faith power, almost endless scenes of mountains and rivers, men plowing and women weaving, primordial phenomena, the collapse of the heavens and the earth, and other scenes flashed inexplicably. The crystal godhead wasn't supposed to be revealed, and it was only because the sea god's phantom approached that the crystal godhead was activated. However, as soon as the godlike figure of the sea god within the shell world approached the godhead didn't react at all. Instead, the figure of the sea god trembled and shattered into pieces. Almost at the same time, the figure of the sea god within the shell world was reduced to powder. Not only that, but the sea god's phantom was the power of the sea god's descendants that Xian, had activated with the help of the sea god's sacred tool, the sea god statue. This kind of power was invincible because of its so-called divine power. This divine power was originally a pseudo-divine power. At this time, the pseudo-divine power collided with the embryonic form of the godhood. Although the embryonic form was not solid and had not truly taken shape, it was still a real godhood. How could low-level cultivators like Xian and Xianxia understand the mysteries of this world? After the sea god's projection was shattered, the godhead's backlash, or rather, the godhead's fury, rushed towards the sea god's projection. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, everything within a radius of 10,000 miles that could sense the sea god's shadow, except for the sea god's statue, turned into nothingness. Then, in the space that was devoid of light, a 9-colored dot appeared on the forehead of the sea god statue. As soon as the 9-colored dot appeared, the entire sea god statue flowed with light, and strands of colors surged into the 9-colored. Xian's hoarse and miserable cry resounded from within the statue, and then her nascent divinity was forcefully pushed out of the statue. All of this happened too quickly, and Xian stood in front of the sea god's statue in a daze, looking at it in disbelief. She did not know what had happened. In just a moment, the entire sea god statue turned gray, and all of the light fell into the 9-colored. Then, the light around Xian's body began to overflow and fall into the 9-colored. Xian was shocked. Her figure flashed and instantly vanished. At the same time, the gray and lusterless pillar of light suddenly glowed brightly, and then countless enormous 7-colored pythons of light started to move throughout the heavens and the earth. Boom! The entire 7-colored shell world had just returned to Xian's control when the entire barrier let out a thunderous rumble. The space within 10,000 miles, 100,000 miles, collapsed at the same time, and the 7-colored light pythons were forcefully extracted. At the same time, the light pythons turned into nothingness, and another 100,000 miles wide pillar of light shot into the sky. Looking at the 7-colored shell world that had previously trapped Xiaohua and the others, Xian's natal shell had already turned into powder, and with a loud rumble, it turned into dust. However, the huge light beam had only just shot out a few miles into the sky when layers of mushroom-like spatial collapses appeared high up in the sky. Countless inexplicable and obscure laws that no one knew about were wantonly tearing through the spatial collapses. The light beam rushed under the laws and crashed down again. The pillar of light that was hundreds of thousands of miles wide fell into the 9-colored in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Xiaohua was dumbfounded, and he also did not know what had happened. However, as far as his eyes could see, his surroundings were distorted, and his divine sense could not leave his body, so he could only stare blankly. The pillar of light fell into the 9-colored sky, and in the sky hundreds of thousands of kilometers above, many strange laws disappeared at the same time. However, layers of spatial collapse still existed, and an unknown law fell from the spatial collapse onto the entire Thousand Demons' sacred realm. As the law fell, the dim seven-colored halo around Bei Xian flowed out uncontrollably and fell towards the nine-colored light. Just as Bei Xian was panicking, an even denser seven-colored light flew out from another part of the space and quickly fell towards the nine-colored light. The source of the light was a seven-colored conch. Not only that, but other than the distorted light and shadow, there were even more faint, dense, five-colored and three-colored lights that all poured into the nine-colored. Xiao Hua was shocked. Impossible. At this time, Bei Xian's crazy voice hysterically screamed, "I am the sea god's descendant. Who can take away my bloodline?" Take away the sea god's bloodline? Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed. Naturally, he thought of the godhead. This must be the power of the godhead. Seeing the sea-like light surging over, Xiao Hua could not help but sigh, "Damn it, what a big deal. This is probably going to take away the bloodline of the rainbow sea god shell in the entire Thousand Beast sacred realm." Thinking of this, Xiao Hua smiled coldly and used his divine sense to check his own space. As expected, after the big seven-colored halo shell world shattered, his space could be sensed. Since this was the case, Xiao Hua did not hesitate to pull Bai Qing out of the Shenhua continent. However, he saw Bai Qing standing in midair in a daze. Before he could figure out the situation in front of him, the five-colored light began to flow out of his body and turned into fragments of light that fell into the nine-colored. "Ayo!" Bai Qing cried out loudly, sensing the disappearance of his divine sense. He did not know what had happened. "Woo!" Without waiting for Bai Qing to say more, Xiao Hua waved his hand and sent this hateful and pitiful demon king into the Shenhua continent again. Bai Qing wasn't the only one who was confused. All of Bei Xian's descendants in the Thousand Demons' sacred realm were confused as well. The most miserable one was the great saint of the demon clan, the five-colored sea god shell, who was closest to the nine-colored. Feng Wu, Wen Chu, and the others were overjoyed when they saw the shell in the sky crack. Feng Wu was about to fly over to save Xiao Hua, but before they could get close, another strange change occurred. An indescribable divine aura surged out of the crack, and the seven-colored shell, which was the most beautiful in the morning, instantly turned into nothingness. Feng Wu was overjoyed, but after the shell disappeared, an enormous beam of light shot out. Even a cultivator as strong as Feng Wu, who was at the 9th grade of essence force, was powerless under the impact of this beam of light. In an instant, he was sent flying like a fallen leaf. Before Feng Wu and the others could regain their balance, they heard another cry of surprise from nearby. What's going on?" Hearing the voice of the five-colored sea god shell, Feng Wu and the others were alarmed and hurriedly looked over. The five-colored light around the five-colored sea god shell surged and flew into the sky. No matter how the five-colored sea god shell waved the shell, it could not stop this. Beside him, the golden-winged roc and the flying feather void beast looked on in confusion, not knowing what to do. Wang. The five-colored sea god shell suddenly glowed with starlight, and the star marks hidden in the shell immediately flew up with the starlight. Woo-woo-woo. The brilliance of the stars and the moon fell from the sky, protecting the five-colored sea god shell. As the space vibrated, the five-colored sea god shell gradually turned into a star, and the five-colored star, which was thousands of miles in size, was revealed in the morning light just like that. Under the sunlight, the 7 colors of the star were so dazzling and dazzling. Unfortunately, it was just like a flash in the pan. Even though the five-colored sea god shell had turned into a star, the five-colored halo showed no signs of stopping. The colorful star slowly faded under the stunned gazes of everyone and the demons. The five-colored brilliance that was extracted just flowed into the light shadow that covered the surroundings and did not appear again. When the entire star turned black and white, the five-colored sea god shell was forcibly pushed out of the star. The shell was still a shell, and the brilliance was still brilliance, but the 5 colors were gone. The primordial spirit of the 5-colored sea god shell appeared from the shell. Although it was not in human form, the golden-winged rock had already seen the frustration, surprise, and confusion on its face. The golden-winged rock couldn't help but ask, "Shell Saint, what's going on?" The five-colored sea god Shell looked at the golden-winged rock in despair. He wanted to hide the truth, but looking at the colors all over the sky, he knew that he was not the only one who would suffer today. Even the ancestor couldn't escape, so how could he hide it? "My bloodline has been taken." The five-colored sea god Shell's voice was like the wind, like a wandering soul answering. "Ah? How is that possible?" Both the golden-winged rock and the flying feather-void beast were shocked. After all, the demon race was different from the human race. The bloodline was extremely important. The five-colored sea god Shell's sea god bloodline was taken away. Could it still be the five-colored sea god Shell? Chapter 4405. Hearing the five-colored seashell's absent-minded answer, the two great saints of the demon race were shocked. They looked at Feng Wu, Celestial, and the others with fear. However, to their surprise, Feng Wu and the others were also puzzled. They looked at the five-colored seashell and the strange light and shadow in the distance. Xiaohua put Bai Qing, who had lost her bloodline, into his spatial zone. He had another thought. He knew that his Shenhua continent was isolated from the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. The backlash from the godhead and the stripping of the sea god's bloodline would not affect the Shenhua continent. Bai Qing's bloodline had been stripped, but the five-colored sea god Shell still had Bai Bo and the little white dragon. However, Xiaohua only thought about it for a moment. He did not take Bai Bo out of Shenhua continent. Not to mention that Bai Bo was already pregnant with the little white dragon's flesh and blood. Just her act of rescuing the little white dragon from the heavenly dam water prison was something that Xiaohua, who clearly distinguished between gratitude and grudges, could not allow such a cruel divine punishment to fall upon her. Although the Thousand Demons' sacred realm was huge, and the three continents were even bigger, the divine punishment was very fast. In just half the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the light that came from all directions had become sparse. The space within hundreds of thousands of miles had lost all color, except for the cluster of 9 colors. The light and shadow barrier was still there. "Fellow Daoist." Celestial flew over and asked curiously, "What kind of technique is this? It's really magical." Xiaohua did not answer Celestial but looked elsewhere. At this time, Reverend Yun and Archdevil Shur were also flying over with wounds all over their bodies. The 108 tribulation-scattered nascent souls were also flying over from all directions. Fortunately, although most of them were severely injured, none of them had lost their lives. Xiaohua slapped the top of his head, and his innate energy gushed out, sucking all the scattered nascent souls into his dantian. Then, Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked at Bai Xian'er in the distance. Bai Xian'er did not transform into her human form. Her original body, which had lost its color, was still standing there, looking very majestic. However, a tentacle grew out of Bai Xian'er's body, and the tentacle tightly grasped the 7-colored conch that had also lost its color. Bai Xian'er. At this point, Xiaohua no longer called Bai Xian'er senior. He only said indifferently, "Are you satisfied with this ending?" "Where exactly are you, God?" Bai Xian'er didn't dare to transform in front of Xiaohua. She could only ask in fear. Xiaohua shook his head. "Let's not talk about whether or not I'm a god. Do you think I look like a god? How could Xiaohua be a god?" Who had ever heard of a god who was only at the 9th level of origin energy in the mortal world? Thus, Bai Xian'er hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "If you are not a god, then your bloodline must be even purer. Otherwise, there would be no divine punishment." "Forget it." Xiaohua smiled bitterly and waved his hand. "I don't know what the reason is. After all, this kind of divine punishment is too strange. It is not something that an insignificant cultivator like me can understand. However, no matter what the process was, the ending is already like this. I just want to ask you, are you satisfied?" Bai Xian'er didn't speak for a long time. When there was no more light coming from outside the barrier, she said, "You guessed right. Most of what I've told you is true. It's just that Bei Ming and I are not lovers. In the words of you humans, he and I are very close blood relatives. He has been very good to me since I was young. I have always regarded him as my blood brother. I am not looking for him for the sea god statue. I am just looking for him. Moreover, I believe that he is also looking for me. Blood relations are not something that can be isolated by some spatial boundary." Xiao Hua nodded slightly. He now believed Bei Xian'er's words. Because when he saw Bei Ming, it was in that innate great formation. Presumably, Bei Ming wanted to use that great formation to find Bei Xian. Unfortunately, Bei Ming didn't have the body of a half-god. He couldn't escape the corrosion of the clear time demon formation. "The reason why I wanted to kill you is actually only for one reason. I didn't want the news that Bei Ming and I were stranded here to be leaked, and I didn't want the bloodline of the sea god to be discovered by the sea tribe." Speaking of this, Bei Xian smiled bitterly. "I did it, and I did it thoroughly. Even if the pursuers of the sea race are here now, when they see Bei Ming and me, I'm afraid they will never kill us. Because we don't have any bloodline of the sea god." Bei Xian paused for a brief moment, then threw her head back and cried out hysterically, "Oh heaven! Almighty gods, please tell me, what have I done wrong? Didn't I spend so much effort just to find my elder brother? Didn't I spend so much effort just to protect myself and prevent the sea race from discovering us? What have I done wrong? Why am I being punished like this by the gods?" Celestial, Reverend Yun, and Archfiend sure had different expressions. Celestial didn't care, Reverend Yun looked pensive, and Archfiend sure didn't think so. Upon hearing Bei Xian's sorrowful and unyielding voice, a cold smile emerged on Xiaohua's face. "Bei Xian," he said word by word, "there is no need for any gods to answer this question, let alone the heaven. I can tell you, it's not your fault for looking for your elder brother, and it's not your fault for protecting yourself. It's because you've done something you shouldn't have done. I don't know what you've done, so I can't tell you anything. First, let's talk about how you've suppressed the little white dragon for over 200 years. What does the little white dragon have to do with you? He doesn't know anything. You've heard that I might know something about Dark North, so you captured him and brought him here. But, since he said he didn't know anything, why did you still suppress him? You've been suppressing him for 200 years. The lifespan of an ordinary human is no more than 100 years. How many 200 years can one live? Fortunately, he is a dragon. Not to mention the suppression, because of your suppression, the Demon King of Shrouding Sky Ridge and the Demon King of Ancient Bell Mountain have a lot of thoughts. Who knows how many of those demon clans and humans related to this Shao died on the way to rescue this Shao. Let's not talk about the little white dragon." Xiao Hua coldly said, "Since I've already come here and rescued Bei Ming from the danger zone and personally brought him to you so you can reunite with your elder brother, I can be considered your benefactor. But, in order to prevent your tracks from being exposed, you actually bit the hand that fed you and wanted to kill me inside your great rainbow halo shell world. An ungrateful person like you, if you don't suffer the wrath of the heavens, if you don't suffer the punishment of the gods, how can the heavens be fair? You only put your own benefits first and don't care about the lives of others. You act as you please in the Thousand Demons sacred realm and act as the ancestor of a demon race. You don't even put the Vairocana revered world sovereign and immortal Emperor Gochin in your eyes. A selfish person like you, a domineering person, if you don't suffer the wrath of the heavens, if you don't suffer the punishment of the gods, how can the heavens be fair? Today, your sea god's shell clan is suffering the punishment of the gods, and it is all because of you. It is all because of your previous sins, the consequences of your previous actions. Only you are qualified to taste such a bitter wine. But at this moment, you still don't repent and don't see your mistakes clearly. You still dare to thicken your skin and question the heavens? If you don't suffer the punishment of the gods, then who will? Bei Xian was truly angry and forgot that the main culprit of the divine punishment was Xiaohua. She angrily said, "What qualifications do you have to criticize me? You didn't kill humans, you didn't kill demons? Not to mention anything else, you led 200,000 humans to attack Bai Qingyu and killed more than 1 million descendants of my Bai Qingyu clan. Why didn't you suffer the punishment of the gods? I killed people, and I also killed demons. However, I have always been afraid of the heavens, and I also believe that the gods are watching over me. Similarly, I have always done things without betraying my conscience, and I have never forced others into a dead end. If someone doesn't offend me, I will never offend them. Of course, if someone offends me, I will definitely retaliate. Everything I did was merely a counterattack, and it was all because you forced me into a corner. Xiao Hua retorted with no trace of politeness. The sea god's bloodline of the entire 1,000 demons' sacred realm has been taken away. What face do you have to talk about leaving people some leeway? Bei Xian snorted disdainfully. You have the final say, so you can do whatever you want. Xiao Hua coldly snorted. If I didn't have a benevolent heart, do you think you can still stand here and talk to me? Bei Xian didn't say anything. After losing her life-bound shell and the great rainbow halo shell realm, although her strength was still very strong, she couldn't be considered a match in front of Xiao Hua. Just those 108 eighth tribulations scattered nascent souls were enough to kill her. Seeing that Bei Xian was speechless, Xiao Hua didn't expect to wake her up with just a few words. He looked at the barrier on the left, which was still covered by it, and his mind swept towards the 9-colored brilliance. Boom! The moment his mind touched it, Xiao Hua felt as if his entire body had been struck by lightning. An incomparably divine will, which was even more vast and majestic than the Dragon Emperor's power that Xiao Hua had seen in the South Sea Dragon Palace, was born. The moment he touched it, Xiao Hua immediately felt as if he was a speck of dust facing the entire world. Then, countless visions flashed in Xiao Hua's mind at the same time. Xiao Hua screamed, and his entire transcendence golden body collapsed. Seeing Xiao Hua like this, how could Bei Xian not know what had happened? She coldly snorted and said, "A man whose heart is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant, as expected. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror and see clearly what you are? A mere human actually dares to covet the sea god's divine power of the Shell clan." Bei Xian's curses were vicious, but what she said was the truth. This 9-colored brilliance was the sea god's divine power that was contained in the bloodline of all the sea god's descendants in the 1,000 demons' sacred realm. Although the grade of this divine power wasn't as high as the godhead that Xiao Hua gave her, it was still far from what a human cultivator like Xiao Hua could obtain. Xiao Hua had only just touched this object when the transcendence golden body condensed from magic power was unable to support the vast divine power and collapsed. Chapter 4406. However, before Bei Xian had a chance to gloat over Xiao Hua's misfortune, Xiao Hua's physical body was revealed within the crumbling golden body. Although Xiao Hua's physical body was riddled with wounds, with many of his muscles and bones exposed, those wounds had been inflicted by Bei Xian's natal shell and had nothing to do with the power of the sea god. How is this possible? Bei Xian exclaimed once again. At this point, she had finally come to a realization that this human cultivator was definitely not an ordinary cultivator. Xiao Hua raised his hand and looked at his intact palm, then lowered his head and looked at every part of his fleshly body. Once again, he recalled the demigod body that Elder Wu of Hutu's Decade told him when he was still in Million Meng Mountains. The demigod body, as the name implies, possesses the body of a great god. Aside from the quintessence of a great god, the demigod body is no different from a great god. Now, I seem to have formed the embryonic form of a quintessence. If I'm not mistaken, the golden threads on the crystal face should be extremely pure power of faith. Xiao Hua then raised his head to look at the 9-colored brilliance and thought to himself, Elder Wu also said that the demigod body and godhead are not something that can be obtained through cultivation, and can only be obtained by relying on the power of heaven and earth and prying into the mysteries of heaven and earth. I was fortunate enough to obtain both, so it can be said that I possess the divine power that Bei Xian spoke of. However, I'm still in the mortal world, so I don't know how to control divine power. As such, it's not that I can't obtain the power of the sea god, it's that I can't obtain it. If this were in the past, perhaps Xiaohua would really have reached out to touch the 9-colored radiance to test his own thoughts. However, Xiaohua was already a grand ascension stage cultivator, so how could he risk his own physical body in such a reckless manner? The power of the sea god is contained in the bloodline of the Shell tribe, so Bei Xian'er can use her bloodline to activate the holy artifact of the Shell tribe. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. He really couldn't bear to abandon the power of the sea god, and his mind raced. That's right. I can't use the power of the sea god as a flying god, so I have to use a holy artifact. Or perhaps the sea god's power also required a bloodline or a saint artifact. The statue of the sea god has already been destroyed, and there are no more descendants of the sea god in the Thousand Beasts sacred realm. My bloodline cannot be borrowed. If that's the case, I'll have to find a suitable saint artifact. Little doe. At this moment, Xiaohua thought of the unknown origin of the item without hesitation. At the same time, he didn't know how to repair it or activate it. But it was another extremely terrifying small fight. Little Doe was able to destroy the sword tomb, trap the ferocious flames of the celestial being Bloodbone, and even release the Pango axe. Presumably, it's not a saint artifact, but it can also restrain the 9-colored sea god's power, right? Xiaohua waved his hand and took out Xiaodou. What is this? Bei Xian'er was slightly stunned. Seeing Xiaohua toss the small bucket towards the 9-colored sea god's power, she couldn't help but mock. Human, don't waste your time. The sea god's power will be taken away by the sea gods soon. What? Hearing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but be shocked. He hurriedly raised his hand and pointed at Xiaodou. He raised his head and said, "You said that God can sense the sea god's power. He will descend here?" Bei Xian'er sneered and replied with contempt, "How can Lord Sea God come to such a low-level world? The sea god's power still exists at this moment only because of the sea god's light world around it. After a while, this light world will disperse under the sunlight and the sea god's power will dissipate in this space. The 3 continents won't be able to withstand the sea god's power, so the sea god's power will naturally go far away. In the end, it will be taken away by the sea god." Oh, so that's how it is. Xiaohua was relieved when he heard this. However, Bei Xian'er said again, "If not for my sea god's bloodline and the saint artifact, it would be impossible for you to use this sea god's power. You should give up on this idea. Once your saint artifact comes in contact with the sea god's power, it will definitely be crushed into powder by the god's punishment. You will also..." Bei Xian'er originally wanted to say that Xiaohua would also be affected, but seeing that the previous 2 sea gods' punishment didn't injure Xiaohua, she obediently shut her mouth. "How do you know if you don't try?" Xiaohua pointed at Xiaodou with his finger, and Xiaodou fell down. Shua! The 9-colored sea god's power was actually taken away by Xiaodou. Moreover, Xiaodou, which had never changed before, actually emitted a 9-colored brilliance when it came in contact with the sea god's power. Layer after layer of light waves wantonly overflowed from the 4 walls of Xiaodou, and around Xiaodou, a thin layer of pitch-black space faintly formed. An aura that could exterminate all living things was emitted from the space. Bei Xian'er's eyes fell out, if she had eyes. Suddenly Bei Xian'er shouted, "You? How can you be a human? You must be a heaven race. This seems to be a heaven race's saint artifact." Bei Xian'er's voice was loud and full of fear. "Che!" Xiaohua disdainfully glared at Bei Xian'er and said, "If you don't know, don't guess blindly. This Xiao is a real human. How can I be a heaven race? Then, how can you have a heaven race's saint artifact? Isn't this the legendary saint artifact used by the heaven race during the ancient war, 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper?" Bei Xian'er couldn't believe her eyes and shouted, "Although I have never seen this item before, but this 10,000 extinguishing aura is exactly the same as what is recorded in my Red Sea region's royal secret codex. Where is the secret codex? Is there a method to refine the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper?" How do I activate this 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper? Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and asked. Greedy human. Bei Xian was completely convinced at this time. She sighed and said, My Shell race's secret codex was already snatched away by the Sea race when they invaded the Red Sea region. If I took the secret codex, even if I escaped to the Thousand Devils sacred realm, I'm afraid the Sea race would still chase after me. As for how to refine the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper and how to activate it, you should go find the Heaven race's secret codex. How would I know? Forget it, forget it. Xiaohua's mind rolled up the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper. Sure enough, no more divine energy was produced. Xiaohua easily stored the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper into his space along with the sea god's power. At this time, the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper could no longer stay in the space where Reverend Yun was. Instead, it landed in another unformed space and stopped, floating quietly. After the 9-colored sea god's power was gone, the sea god's light realm was also slowly disintegrating under the scorching sun. Bei Xian's true form was revealed under the sunlight. Although the 7-colored brilliance was no longer there, her snow-white skin was tinged with a pinkish color, which really made Xiaohua's itch. Rumble! As if unable to bear Xiaohua's passionate gaze, Bei Xian's huge body emitted a rumbling sound and quickly shrunk. In just a moment, she had transformed into a beautiful woman dressed in a snow-white dress. Unfortunately, this beautiful woman's face was filled with an unyielding stubbornness. Her eyes were also filled with frost, and she looked at everything around her with impatience. It was only when her gaze fell on the conch in her hand that warmth appeared in her eyes. The light realm was gone, and Xiaohua's gaze moved away from Bei Xian's body. He looked around and saw that the ground had collapsed, leaving behind a deep pit. The mountains and lakes he saw before were all gone, and under the deep pit and the crack in the ground, there was an undulating mess. Gravel, wood chips, flesh, and bones were scattered everywhere. Everything was completely different from the Bai Qingyu that Xiaohua saw before. The sea turns into mulberry fields, the mountains are moved, and the seas are filled. That's all there is to it. Xiaohua looked around and released his divine sense. Then he shook his head slightly and sighed. If it weren't for this battle, how could it have become like this? While he was talking, a rather anxious Yuan was swept over, but when it landed on Xiaohua, it was quickly withdrawn. Then, a phoenix spread its wings and flew over from afar. Wasn't that the 7 stars' great saint, Fengwu? After Fengwu, Wen Chu and Daoist, which each used their divine abilities and flew over like shooting stars. The 3 clones shouted almost in unison, Fellow Daoist, are you all right? Ah. Xiaohua lowered his head to look at his tattered Daoist robe and the wounds on his body. He said with a smile, However, they are all flesh wounds and can't be considered serious. I'll be fine after resting for a few days. Even fellow Daoist Celestial was injured. This ancestor of the 1,000 demons' sacred realm is indeed powerful. Fengwu narrowed her eyes, and her gaze fell on Bei Xian, not far away. A 7 stars great saint is indeed awe-inspiring. Bei Xian felt the ferocity in Fengwu's eyes and said with equal harshness, Unfortunately, Xiaohua didn't think you were my opponent, so he didn't dare to pull you into the barrier. Otherwise, I'd like to see what you're capable of. It's not too late now. Fengwu flapped her wings and sneered. There seemed to be no fear in her tone. Ancestor? At this moment, the 5-colored sea god Shell also flew over with a long face and said anxiously, What exactly happened? What happened? It's nothing. Bei Xian looked up at the sky and pointed at the sun, saying, The night of the 1,000 demons' sacred realm has passed and the day has come. The sun still rises. When the day ends and the night comes, the stars still rise. But the 5-colored sea god Shell wanted to ask more, but Bei Xian snorted coldly and scolded it via voice transmission. Only then did the 5-colored sea god Shell stand to the side and look at the sky, feeling wronged. It was the golden-winged great rock that flew the fastest. Only now did it come over with the flying feather void beast. When the two great saints of the demon race saw Bei Xian, they didn't dare to slight her and hurriedly bowed. Bei Xian didn't say anything to the two great saints of the demon race and only nodded slightly. The two great saints seemed to be very used to Bei Xian's attitude. After getting up, they looked at each other and stood to the side without saying anything, quietly waiting for Bei Xian's orders. Bei Xian glanced at the three great saints' respect and felt slightly relieved. She asked again, "By Qing you caused such a big commotion, why did only you three great saints come over? Where are the other three?" Chapter 4407. Yes, old ancestor. The five-colored sea god Seashell hurriedly replied, "There's a warning from the north of the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. 3 demons have been killed for no reason. About 200,000 demons have gone missing. The 3 great sages have split up and gone to investigate the situation." Bei Xian was stunned. The demons from the Boundless Sea, Suncheong Mountain, and Dark Abyss didn't go? They actually alerted 3 great sages? Old ancestor, the golden-winged rock said, "Sangyu Heaven sent 3 great sages to investigate, but they didn't send back any information. They probably can't come back." Seeing that the situation was urgent, Dragon Sage and the others went personally. Bei Xian nodded and didn't ask any more. At this time, Xiaohua had already transmitted the whole story in his heart. When Chu, Fengwu, and Wu's eyes lit up. They really didn't expect Bei Xian's ability to be so powerful, and such a miraculous thing actually happened in the big 7-colored halo shell realm. The so-called divine punishment, godhead, divine race, and sea god were all unheard of. After Xiaohua finished speaking, he looked at the 3 great sages of the demon race and knew it was time to end this matter. He took out the Kunlun mirror and used his magic power to bring Little White Dragon and Jade Wave out of the Shenhua continent. "Ah!" Bei Xian exclaimed in surprise when she saw Jade Wave. On the other hand, Xiaohua glanced at Bei Xian and said indifferently, "Apart from the fact that I won't attack unless I'm attacked, I'm different from you. Unless it's the end, I definitely won't cut off all paths of retreat and leave no chance of survival for others. I know you didn't believe me before, but now, do you believe me?" The 3 great sages of the demon race were confused. Bei Xian looked up at the blue sky and then at the vast land. She sighed. "Alas, even if I don't believe you, so what?" Her tone was so vicissitudes of life that she didn't seem so depressed when she was defeated by Xiaohua. Then Bei Xian bent down and performed a courtesy that Xiaohua didn't understand. She said, "Spiritual Master Zhao's breadth of mind is the first I've seen in my life. I was wrong before, please accept my bow." "Sigh, Senior, there's no need to be so courteous." Xiaohua also sighed. Based on the sea god statue alone, regardless of whether the rainbow conch was related to Shang Huaming or not, Bei Xian was definitely related to him. He could be considered half a disciple of Shang Huaming. As a junior, he should be on good terms with Bei Xian. But because of Bei Xian, things had escalated to this point. Not only had Bei Xian suffered divine punishment, but even the sea god bloodline of the Thousand Monsters Sacred Realm and the innocent rainbow sea conch had been affected. Xiaohua and Shang Huaming's previous feelings had almost completely vanished. Furthermore, Xiaohua almost didn't dare to believe that if the rainbow sea conch could transform and learned of what had happened, he would fly into a rage. Therefore, he could only help Bei Xian up and said, "This is fate playing tricks on us. You and I are just pawns in the game. The previous misunderstanding. Why don't we just let it go? Spiritual Master is so magnanimous. I really don't have the face to face you. I will do as you say." Bei Xian stood up, her heart filled with complex feelings. At this moment, Little White Dragon woke up from his daze. He was shocked to see the 3 great sages. Although he had never seen a great sage before, how could he not recognize the aura and appearance of the great sage of the demon clan? He was just about to pull Jade Wave and escape when he turned around and saw Xiaohua. Beside Xiaohua was Daoist sorcerer, who he was even more familiar with. "Xiao, Little White, why are you here?" There's nothing for you to do here. Hurry up and leave. Little White Dragon's face didn't show any ecstasy. Instead, after a flash of surprise, his face immediately tensed up. He hurriedly shouted and gave Xiaohua a look. Xiaohua smiled, his heart filled with warmth. He waved his hand and said, "Little White, I've wronged you these 200 years. Ah?" Until now, Little White suddenly realized that although the Xiaohua in front of him was very familiar, his temperament was completely different. Even with his own strength, he couldn't detect Xiaohua's strength. Little White retreated a few feet in shock and said anxiously, "Are you Xiaohua? If he's not Xiaohua, who am I? Who am I?" Daoist sorcerer extended his hand and said with a smile. Daoist sorcerer didn't look like Xiaohua. His face couldn't be distinguished by the naked eye and divine sense. However, Little White Dragon knew immediately that Daoist sorcerer was the soul cultivator Xiaohua. He was the soul cultivator Xiaohua who cultivated together with him in the mysterious dark clouds of Xiaohua. Little White Dragon stretched out his hand almost without hesitation and shook hands with Daoist sorcerer. Feeling the slight heat from Daoist sorcerer's hand, Little White Dragon immediately understood. He was really ecstatic and shouted, "Congratulations, fellow cultivator." "Ha, no need to congratulate me. It won't be long before I congratulate you," Daoist sorcerer said with a smile and looked up at Jade Wave behind Little White Dragon, who was at a loss. Little White Dragon chuckled and waved at Jade Wave. "Come here quickly." As soon as Jade Wave landed in the air, she immediately saw the 3 great saints of the demon race. She almost fainted, but when she saw Bei Xian, she was surprised because she only knew of the great ancestor, but had never seen her before. However, just 3 demon race great sages were enough to make her feel like she was sitting on pins and needles. She stood in the air and didn't dare to move. However, what puzzled Jade Wave was that the 3 demon race great sages didn't even look at her. They all held their breath and looked at the sky, treating her as nothing. While Jade Wave was at a loss, Little White Dragon's voice came. Jade Wave was slightly stunned and didn't move. "Bitch!" Little White Dragon was angry and shouted, "These are my good friends. They came specially to save me. Why aren't you coming over to greet them?" "Yes, darling Xiao." Jade Wave panicked and hurried over. Hearing Jade Wave call Little White Dragon, "Darling Xiao," Xiaohua's face was a little embarrassed. He instantly thought of Fairy Jing and felt bitter in his heart. Hee hee. Little White Dragon proudly pointed at Jade Wave and said, "Big brothers, this is Little One's wife. Little brother took her in when I was in by Qingyu. When little brother was suppressed in the Heavenly Dam water prison, she took care of little brother. Seeing that she was so attentive, little brother took her. And little brother escaped from the Heavenly Dam water prison. It was also her credit. Come, this is..." Little White Dragon first pointed at Xiaohua and was about to introduce him. Then he remembered and scolded, "This is the real Xiaohua, Daoist Xiao. You don't have to call me Darling Xiao in the future." "Yes, Darling Xiao," Jade Wave answered naturally. However, her face immediately flushed red and she looked at Little White Dragon with some fear. "Bitch, what did I tell you?" Little White Dragon felt that he had lost face and scolded, "Call me." At this point, Little White Dragon rubbed his nose like Xiaohua. Forget it, he had called himself Xiao many times in the past 200 years. He had forgotten that he didn't have a name. Xiaohua smiled and said, "You are this Xiao's brother in tribulation. You also helped this Xiao block the calamity of suppression for 200 years. So what if your surname is Xiao? How about I call you Xiao Bai?" Little White Dragon was a member of the dragon race and had always regarded women as nothing. He could scold Jade Wave at will, but this didn't mean that he was stupid. On the contrary, his experience and the inheritance of the dragon race from the fire dragon soul allowed him to understand more. He had seen Xiaohua grow from a qi condensation cultivator to a high-grade cultivator that even he didn't know the depth of. Now that Xiaohua was able to remain calm in front of a great sage of the demon race, he naturally guessed Xiaohua's cultivation base. A human Grand Ascension Stage cultivator called him a brother in tribulation and even asked him to take his surname. How could Little White Dragon not know to climb up the ladder? He didn't pay any special respects and only smiled casually as he replied, "Hee hee, thank you, big brother." He then pointed at Xiaohua and said, "This is Xiaohua, Daoist Master Xiao. Greetings, Daoist Master Xiao." Jade Wave's expression tensed up as she respectfully saluted. Her posture was very standard and was the etiquette of a human woman. It seemed that she had worked hard before. Xiaohua smiled and raised a hand to help Jade Wave up. "You are Xiaobai's wife and my sister-in-law. From now on, we are a family, so there's no need to be too polite." "Yes, Daoist Master." Jade Wave's heart was finally at ease upon hearing Xiaohua mention a family. Some of her previous worries had been answered. "These are all my good friends." Xiaobai naturally couldn't recognize all of Xiaohua's clones, so it wasn't convenient for him to introduce them at this time. He simply pointed at the clones and said with a smile, "I'll introduce them to you in the future." "Greetings, uncles." Jade Wave saluted again, even though she really didn't understand what these so-called uncles meant. "Ha, get up." Feng Wu and the others laughed. Xiaobai is really lucky. After being suppressed, he can actually find a beautiful woman to serve him. Not to mention fellow Daoist Xiao, even we are jealous. This is where my charm lies. Big brothers, you can't be jealous." Xiaobai's tone was very similar to Xiaohua's. He even touched his nose and said, "Ha." Feng Wu and the others couldn't help but laugh again. "You really boast shamelessly. Little White, stand at the side." Xiaohua and the other clones finished laughing, and then they instructed. "Yes, big brother." Xiaobai pulled Jade Wave and hurriedly stood beside Xiaohua. Xiaohua raised his head, looked at Bei Xian, and asked, "Senior, Xiaobai was suppressed by you for no reason for 200 years. How do you think you should compensate him?" "This is my fault. Xiaobai, whatever compensation you want, just say it. I'll agree to it." Bei Xian saw with her own eyes that the only bloodline of the Sea God clan had an affair with Little White Dragon. Moreover, Jade Wave still had Little White Dragon's bloodline in her bosom. She also had Sea God's bloodline. This Little White Dragon was originally her family, so why would she be stingy? Even without Xiaohua saying it, she was willing to agree to any condition of Little White Dragon. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.